Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Trevor, it's time to open a cold one.
Been a while. It's been a while since we did one of those. Also, especially, did you drop it on the drive home or something?
It blew up. It exploded.
I see that.
It exploded.
Yeah, don't let it get on your tech. Because usually it was like the can. It was the can popping.
Yeah, I know. I didn't have a can this time.
Yeah. All right.
Be right back.
All right. Cool. And Frank Rizzozzani is also joining us. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm excited to talk about Game of the Year. Did you know he had that? Or was he hiding that?
He was hiding it.
Time?
I mean, also, there's my two monitors and then his two monitors in between us. So I can't, I can basically see his face through a sliver of his two monitors. And that's all I see on our side of things. But yes, so we've had to push our Game of the Year episode here a couple weeks. But we're able to get Frank in here now. Logan basically opted out of joining us for Game of the Year this year. He didn't play a ton of things last year. The one game he was going to give some love to, I will talk about when we get to it on my list. But yeah, so basically it's just the three of us for this 2022 Game of the Year funness. If you've ever joined us for an of the year kind of conversation, what we do is this: we kind of take turns going through our honorable mentions at first, and then we go through our number 10s, our number 9s, and so on and so forth until we get to our individualized number 1s. And then I go through and kind of tally up That Nerdy Site Game of the Year totals, top rankings, based on our individual lists combined. So a number 1 game gets 10 points, a number 2 game gets 9 points, so on and so forth. And then we'll kind of end the episode with our collective Game of the Year announcement and stuff like that. To avoid talking about the same game 3 times, if somebody mentions I have this game at number 10 and somebody else has it higher up on the list, they'll jump in, say it's higher on my list. We'll kick the conversation down the line until it gets to kind of the topmost person's list. So I think that is the gist of everything. So yeah, let's go ahead. Yes, Frank, go ahead.
We're doing all 10 at once this year? I know we broke it up that one time. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, for recording purposes last year, we did it in 2 parts. We recorded in 2 parts and then edited the whole thing together. Since there's only 3 of us, I imagine this will probably go quicker this year. And we can also rein in maybe our thoughts on the games, especially games that we've talked about extensively in podcasts and stuff like that. But it also could be weird because we might have a very eclectic list of 3 different sets of games for just it was very much a year, I think, where there were a lot of games that spoke to a lot of different tastes. So I'm sure we'll have a few of the bigger ones, on all 3 of our lists, but I'll ultimately be very curious to see which ones actually hit all of our lists versus which ones only Trevor or on only my list or on only Cam's list or on only your list. So but yeah, plan is to knock it all out tonight. So yeah, without further ado, Cameron, hit me with some of your honorable mentions.
So I do have just a couple of honorable mentions. I think massive shout out to a game like Road 96. Frank, that might be on your top 10.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so
I
won't
can talk about it now.
Yeah, just a little bit. I'll say my time with it was I didn't finish the game, but I did get quite through it a few times. It was not as appealing to me to kind of if I had messed up or I didn't make it through, that I had to start with a brand new person. There was no way to try again. They do really lock you into your choices pretty hard. And so that's why it wasn't in my top 10. Among it just would have gotten bumped out anyway. There's a lot of great games that came out this year. After that was Signalis. I don't know if Signalis is on anybody else's.
Yeah, it's not on my list, but I heard it was great.
Yeah, it's really fantastic, especially if you are a fan of the Resident Evil style horror genre. The survival horror genre, it's an absolute treat. People deserve to play it. It's It's on Game Pass. Both these games are on Game Pass, by the way. I highly suggest checking them out. They are totally worth your time. Next up is Coral Island. Don't think it's on anybody's list.
It's an honorable mention of mine as well, but no, it did not make my top 10.
Okay, cool. So Trevor and I will share our thoughts on it. Coral Island's fantastic for a game preview. I think that it's definitely worth checking out. If you're a fan of Stardew Valley, Harvest Moon, any of these kind of like more character central farming sim games, it's really good. And it does have both a tone and style, as well as kind of like gameplay mechanics that do separate it from a like other games in its genre. But besides the point that it's early access, I don't think the controls are as tight as they need to be, and I hope they are once the game's fully out. But it's definitely worth checking out. It's on Game Pass as well. Trevor, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you sold me on the game when we talked about it on the podcast. I hopped in, played I think I probably ended up playing more of the game than you did over the next few nights. And yeah, the reason it doesn't crack my top 10, isn't higher on my list, is because it is a game. It's just not a done game yet. I got to the first festival, and there were continual placeholders of this will be a thing you can do in the real game, but it's not here yet. So I just got to the point where I was like, well, I don't want to pour more time into this game that's not yet a game. Maybe I'll circle back to it when it is a 1.0 release and can enjoy it there. Because yeah, it was a very fun twist on the Stardew Harvest Moon kind of genre. It was really fun, just how wildly Disneyified all of the characters looked. Every single one of them. So yeah, Coral Island, fun little honorable mention for me as well.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say about it is I think that it's just I got to that point as well, Trevor. You got to it first. I came back to it because I was like, oh yeah, and you're like, oh, I put a lot more time into it. I was like, oh, okay, so I'll keep playing. But then I got to that same point. And I was like, maybe I'll go past it. But yeah, it just really needs to be a finished game before I'll play it. But I think that this is definitely a gem for people to be looking out for.
Yeah, in the underwater, clearing the reef section, I started getting to this turtle who basically blocks your progress until you give him a thing that he's that he had he has a thought bubble over his head for the thing, but if you ever talk to him, it was placeholder NPC text or something like that. So I was like, well, good thing they gave me the icon so I know what to give him, and sure enough, I'd give it to him and then he'd move away and I could proceed through more. Did that basically with him twice, and I was like, all right, I think I've explored enough of this world. Hit me with your next honorable mention, Cam.
Next honorable mention is WWE 2K22. For somebody who has been a massive critic of the WWE 2K series for several years, I missed 2021, I think, or maybe it was 2020.
They missed 2021.
Oh, they missed 2020.
They didn't make one in 2021 because 2020 was so badly received. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not. So I didn't pick up 2020. Trevor did, and that's why he's very. Oh no,
no. I saw all of the broken memes and stuff like that of the game.
Yeah, so it was so bad that I was there was all the there was the stuff coming out from WWE that they were really upset with how they've been received, about how the games had been going out broken, the microtransaction policy on 2020. It was just so in such a bad shape that they dropped the studio, gave it to another studio that was with 2K because Uke is no longer making it. But what ended up happening, what ended up coming out with WWE 2K22 is I think they kept a lot of the really great parts about the simified version that had been put out up until up through 2K19. And then they brought back a lot of the more classic arcadey functions that were great. And then on top of that, they really invested heavily into the, I shouldn't say heavily. They as heavily as they did, they could do in a year. They invested into the Create a Wrestler storyline. There's an entire thing where you can bounce between. It's a good mix of a wrestler version of a GM mode of where you could really play through the storyline with your Create a Wrestler, having that back and having that go move forward with fully voiced lines. It's it's still kind of not as bad as EA, Jake from State Farm showing up in EA, in
2K. The NBA.
Was
only,
that 2K?
Yeah.
That's only because they couldn't, like, the games had been so bad they probably couldn't sell the likeness to anybody. But once they start doing it, I have no doubt 2K will try and exploit and throw as much stupid ads as they can into that game.
Well, I believe that was EA's Madden. That was the Madden. Was that 2K?
No, it was 2K. It was NBA 2K.
Okay, there you go. I know Madden had a story mode as well. But that actually makes total sense that it's a 2K thing. Because that's definitely a 2K thing to do. Yeah, so WWE 2K22 up there as my honorable mention. I had an absolute blast. I loved the way that the Kind of Funny community rallied around this game and really made it a lot more fun. Shout out to Olive Party. Shout out to the Lamplighter. If you follow any of the KFW stuff, you know, also like shout out to KFW is JNW. Love you, Joey Noel, both the fictional WWE 2K version as well as the real life person. Just what an absolute fun time to like be making characters and how detailed you could get. Just an absolute blast. But not top 10 worthy, especially this year.
Cool. Keep going. Any others you got?
Yes, I have Live Alive. I have not played enough of this game for it to make my top 10. It's definitely on Trevor's top 10.
It's not. No, it's I think it just missed my top 10. It's an honorable mention on mine as well.
There you go. So Live Alive, I have put in probably about 5 hours into this game. Most of that is running around the spaceship. I definitely started on the wrong chapter. I should have started on a different chapter. This one is long. It is big. And like you are just, it's a walking sim. And I'm like, this game's supposed to be known for its combat stuff. And I'm just like, I'm not in it at all. Like there's an arcade game where I can play the combat, but that's it. Like otherwise it's just like deep space drama. And I'm like, oh, this is not the game I wanted to play. So,
cut back 15 minutes ago to when we started recording and Cameron was placing his camera and I was like, hey, I want you to put it in a place that's stable. And he put it dangling between his two monitors in a place that was very clearly not stable. So the freeze frame of like, you're probably wondering how we got here is exactly what just happened. While he's readjusting and getting it refocused, I will share my Live Alive thoughts. Yeah, the section of the game that you're playing is basically like a homage to Aliens and 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's like sci-fi horror survival stuff. And so yeah, there isn't a lot of combat. It is largely just running away from the monster and all that stuff. And so yeah, the other chapters, like the cool thing about Live Alive, I think, is that each chapter does have its just completely separate genre and style and feel, and a whole bunch of fun to be had from that. And then the way that characters from each of those chapters kind of come together in the end game was a fun thing. And I'm glad it got to play it. I'm glad it like finally made its way west. Also had some great music, and some of the chapters were like really cool, fun standouts, and then other chapters were not. And so there was a very uneven nature to the game for me. And like combat was, I mean, the thing that I would like most directly compare it to now would be like South Park, The Fractured But Whole, where it's like you're on a grid and kind of moving around and trying to get like the right positioning on enemies and stuff like that. But also like it sometimes it was very easy to get like just super overpowered. And so the combat ends up being just more of like an interruption and a chore, because it's like, all right, I can very easily kill these people, but now I've got to spend 30 seconds doing it. And so it's the random battleness that starts kind of getting in the way of itself a little bit, just from that style of, in that era of RPG. But yeah, overall fun. I would be very curious, Kim, if you get to hop back into it and play more of it, or just the other chapters of it to see how they vibe with you and whatnot.
I plan on getting back to it. Also, the theme of this podcast is that Trevor was right about everything. That's the theme of this podcast. Between hey, no dumb bits, to hey, your camera's not like in a good place. Yeah, the theme of this podcast is Trevor's always right.
All right, I'm going to keep that in mind when we get to your number one.
Yeah. So my next honorable mention, this will be I have just two more, it's Dying Light 2. Dying Light 2 is in my honorable mentions. This game was definitely not going to make my top 10. As somebody who recorded all my playthrough of it, where I was very I'm having fun, like especially towards the end game where I'm like things just aren't good here. That is a game that came out that has a lot of fun times in it, and then some probably not really great times. And they're all recorded. You can watch them on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Friday Night Dying Light, which was a fun series to make, and like an awesome project to do. But overall, like that game is rough.
Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. It's. I wouldn't even call it necessarily an honorable mention for my list. It's in my top 20, but it's like pretty low on the top 20 list. Because I ultimately I watched enough of your stuff and was like, all right, this isn't gonna I'll be in control enough that I can deal with the horrorness of it. I'll be fine. And so while you were playing it, I picked it up on sale, played through it in a week, and then played through a New Game Plus run as well to try and go for some more of the trophies. It's also going to be on my dishonorable mentions for worst platinum of the year, because when I played it 6 months down the road, a couple trophies were still very glitched and just didn't pop for me. And in particular, they have trophies for maxing out health and stamina, but they don't give you enough upgrades over the course of the game, even in a New Game Plus, to max out both of those things. So you basically have to max out one, reload a save, and then max out the other, or max out one and then on a completely separate run through of the game max out the other. And it's fuck you. Don't do that. Just terrible trophy design. Boo. Bad trophy design. Game was fine. It was whatever. I imagine Dying Light 1 is better, just based on people's reactions in response to that one, especially compared to Dying Light 2. But it was fine. It was whatever it was.
Also, shout out to the worst DLC idea you could have for that game. The DLC idea is it's the Coliseum one, and it's the one thing people were really not stoked about your game and reviews was the combat. And that's the thing you want to focus on. Bold choice. I'll leave it at that.
But yes, shout out to Friday Night Dying Light, our now second longest ongoing series, after I was so inspired by it that I went and did an Elden Ring not an Elden Ring, maybe Elden Ring will get there, who knows, a Skyrim Elder Scrolls series that I think is currently 2 episodes longer than Friday Night Dying Light, but yeah. I mean, you definitely have the entirety of a very I guess there's a little open worldness to Dying Light 2, but yours is obviously much more of a linear thing, whereas mine is here's 5 episodes on the Thieves Guild stuff, and here's 7 episodes on the companions or whatever. So
yeah, I got to a point in my recordings where I specifically was not recording a lot of the side stuff. A lot of I spent way more time in it than what is actually recorded. Doing challenges and stuff to increase my stamina so I don't get my face whacked over and over again in the combat. But overall, yeah, that game it's in my honorable mentions because it's definitely the game that I've played most this year, or it was.
Yeah.
There's
obviously I know at least one game that, and probably 2 games that have overtaken it. So you have one more honorable mention there, Cam?
Yeah, it's Power Wash Simulator. This game was going to be my number 10, but it got knocked out because I don't know how to count.
Well, at least you figured that out now and not midway through the podcast, like in the Movie of the Year episode.
That's accurate. Or Game of the Year last year. Anyway, yeah, no, overall, or 2 years, whatever. Point is that it's Power Simulator. It's a really good game. I had a lot of fun with it. Did not realize that after you finish completing a job, it does a photo capture of what you had already written. And so I wrote an expletive. That's not really an expletive, but it's definitely not something I want my mother seeing that I sprayed on that van that I sprayed down. Because it's certainly not something I would want people to see. I'm glad I didn't let's play that. Holy crap. It's not a bad word, but it's a word I wouldn't want my mother knowing that I know.
Fair enough. I also very much enjoyed Power Wash Simulator earlier the year. I didn't count it in my Game of the Year consideration because it came out originally to PC in 2021. But it's also coming to PlayStation, like, I think this week as we're recording this, and I'm tempted to pick it up and just enjoy zoning out over the next few weeks with it and picking up some trophies. So we'll see.
Yep.
So that's it on your honorable mentions there, Cam?
Yeah, but I'll let you know if they do a multiplayer mode, like I'll do that. Let's start up a business.
All right.
I thought there was one already.
If there is, let's fucking go, Trevor.
Yeah, there
let's
might be.
fucking go.
Yeah, there might be a multiplayer, like we can both kind of jump into a map and spray it down. I'll dig into it. Frank, hit us with your honorable mentions.
Yeah, so a lot of mine are some games that like didn't come out this year, but that I played this year because that's kind of most of what I played this year was like backlog stuff and just other random stuff from like Game Pass is what made up a lot of my list too. But I wanted to give a shout out to I finally played Bug Snacks and the
Nice.
DLC, the Isle of Big Snacks too, because that's kind of what I ended up waiting for and just kind of played it all together. But I enjoyed that game a lot more than I thought I would. Like, it's actually a super fun kind of like puzzly game, and I ended up catching all of the. I think I got 99% of all the Bug Snacks just on my own, and I ended up Googling like the last one, and then it was something like the one of the ways to get it, because there's a couple ways you can do all of them, was like is something so stupid. I was just like, oh, I didn't think of that. Like, I don't even remember which one that was, but I felt so, like it was just so fun, like figuring it out and then like getting new tools and being able to like also combine your tools in like weird, interesting ways. And like I love that like the game just kind of, as long as you catch it, there's like a bunch of different ways you can kind of do different ones. And sometimes they even like it'll just happen in the environment where like one Bug Snacks will like hit another one, and then you're just like, cool, I'm gonna go grab that guy. Like I didn't have to do anything for that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. As I've been going through today, putting a bunch of like my pins on like corkboard things, and I had like a bunch of Bug Snacks pins. And I was like, I want to go back to that DLC because I just never did because I played it back at launch. One of my earliest PS5 platinums. How was the DLC for it?
I liked it. I like the base game, I think, a lot more, and it's like a lot bigger because the island only adds like a couple new Bug Snacks, and the big kind of thing with that is that they're very big. But it lets you do some like interesting, fun things, and like I'm kind of glad I did wait because they added like stuff to the base game where you get like a house and you can customize it, and then you can also collect like hats now. So I was glad like because that is all kind of like sewn throughout the game, and I enjoyed that stuff because it kind of makes the game feel like even bigger and fuller with like more to do. But the actual like island DLC itself I thought was like fine.
Cool. Yeah, that was a fun game. I to your like all of the fun ways you can like mix and match the tools and stuff. Because I went back. I started to play a little bit, I think, when it came to Game Pass to like revisit it a little bit. And I like the different sauces. I like that's like a mechanic they give you since you're trying to capture food. So yeah, these ones are going to be super responsive to ranch, just like a buffalo wing might be or something like that. Yeah. They do so a lot of it's like fun and like, oh, it's very intuitive that of like, how do I try and attract that thing? Well, it's this kind of food. What would I dip in that, what would I put with that kind of food? Let me try that. And yeah, it was a fun approach to a Pokemon Snap kind of game. Any other honorable mentions you want to give some love to?
Yeah, I also played this year my friend Pedro. And that was a surprisingly also super fun and great game. Like I had heard good things about it, and it looked really cool when the trailers, like the year it came out. And if I had played it the whatever year it had come out, it probably would have made my list for that year. But it was just fun how like they kept updating and changing things from level to level and giving you like new things to play around with, and then even putting in some of those like side scroller levels where you're on like a skateboard or like a motorcycle or something. And then there's all these like super crazy like worlds for like a little bit where you're kind of going like level to level, and at one point it's like inside someone's head or something, so it's like it gets super weird, and they kind of introduce like flying and other stuff. And like I just like it was constantly super fun like the entire time, and they were constantly just changing the little things to keep it super interesting. And I was also really impressed by the one of the things they show off in the trailers that you can kind of like throw a pan in the air and like ricochet a bullet off it and hit somebody. And I thought that would be more of like a scripted moment kind of thing. But that there's a lot of that throughout the entire game, and you can just kind of do a lot of really wild and crazy stuff. And like I thought that was actually really fun and like really impressive too.
Nice. Yeah, that's another one I played like back around the time it came out, or I played it at some point when it came to Game Pass, and like as you're talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, that would that like thinking back on it, that is a very frank game. So I'm glad you got a chance to check it out and play it, because yeah, it was a cool frenetic like action, like side scroller Hotline Miami type game, like mixed with yeah, like gun fu kind of like John Wick esque stuff, and yeah, like lots of pans and stuff to be shooting around. Like everything goes into bullet time, and yeah, lots of fun, just like insane action in that kind of vibe. Did you ever play that one, Cameron?
Yes, I did. I thought it was an absolute I had an absolute blast on it. I thought it was fantastic. I really really love the idea that it kind of picks up on that. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I played it, but it is one where like the world doesn't move until you move, right? Like it's or no, that's just in Super Hot. I was thinking that it had that sort of mechanic though, didn't it? Maybe not.
I don't
Frank,
think
Frank,
so.
you'd have to tell me. You're the
Yeah,
one who
I don't
played
think
it.
so.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
Was it? I forgot what about it was about like kind of like the stop and play type feature. Maybe. Nope. It's just a fun
Katana
game.
Zero had a little bit of that.
Yeah, I don't
think.
know what about. I'm trying to think. There was a specific mechanic about it that I liked about it, but I can't remember it. I played it like pre-release. It was a pre-release thing that I had access to when I was with Handsome Phantom. So it was that long ago, but I still like remember it being like, oh, the best part about it is like it's banana.
Yeah.
The banana is your
follows
friend
you the whole time.
Yeah, he follows you the
Yeah.
whole time, and he tells you to like murder things, and it's great. That was fun. That's a fun game. It really is. It like John. I almost said John Wick. I was going to say John Wick, but I was going to say, like Trevor said, it has a lot of like a John Wick type vibe of like one man versus an army type thing in like gunplay, and it's really really cool. If you have a chance, like if anybody out there has a chance to play it, they should.
Cool. Hit us with your next one, Frank.
Yeah, so I also want to give a shout out to the Mafia Definitive Edition. It's the remake of the first Mafia game.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about it a little bit, but I don't think I've gone super deep into it. But I do really like those Mafia games, and I understand they hit like a certain level because like the gameplay is never always like only ever like okay, and a lot of times the open world's not the best, but they always really nail the story and the characters, and then also like the vibe and the settings, and each Mafia game depicts like totally different decades, from like the 20s and the 30s, which is the first one. The second one's the 40s and the 50s. And then the third one's like the 60s and the 70s. And they always nail like the setting they're going for perfectly. And this first one has like an amazing story. And the remake I thought was actually really good. It still has the same problems, like I said, with the other Mafia games, where like the gameplay is like okay. And also I had a huge problem where like I constantly was running out of ammo, and this is like a cover shooter, and if you step out of your cover you're going to get killed really quickly because it's kind of like semi-realistic. And so then having to be like, cool, I need to run over there and get a gun that has like 3 bullets in it, it suddenly becomes like some weird The Last of Us in like certain bigger moments. And it has this sin that like all these games commit, where for some reason towards the end of the game they're like, what if we did a level where you did a shootout on a dock and we threw like 50 guys at you and you have no ammo? And it happens in Mafia 2, and I think it might happen in the third one, and I'm like, I don't know why this is like a fallback idea. But I did really like it.
They just right click and they right click and click update decade, and it's the same chunk of game.
No, exactly, right? Where they're like, we have the design doc for this actual doc. We can just use all this. But like, it's a really good game, and I like that there's a really good attention to detail in those games. Like one of the small things that impressed me about this one is I was listening to the radio in one of the cars, and I went through a tunnel, and then the radio cut off and like went out, and then it came back when I came out of the tunnel, and I was like, that's a really cool little like attention to detail thing, because these games have like so much attention to detail. And also a weird thing too, but like the reflections in that game look really good. Like there is a moment where like one of those fuel tankers like drove by, and it has like an active reflection of like the whole world as it like drove away from me, and I was like, that looks insane. Like,
nice. Some environment artist is wildly happy that you actually noticed something like that in the game. Very cool.
No, exactly.
Anything else?
Yeah, I don't want to go through too many, but another one I did want to give a shout out to was Disc Room. I hit this was a really big hit when we were at PAX East a couple years ago,
Mhm.
and I didn't play it then, but I saw it and watching it on the TV. I didn't really get it. I thought it was kind of like, oh, it's like a Super Meat Boy type thing, but it's actually way different. Where you're kind of going into these like puzzle challenge rooms that involve like discs flying around and you trying not to get hit. And I ended up playing through the whole thing on Game Pass, and it was one of those ones I just got addicted to for like a day or two and just kind of played all the way through. And like I actually thought it was really fun, and that's totally not a game that I thought would have like grabbed me or like I would have had fun with, but I thought it was really really amazing and really fun.
Nice. I never checked that one out. How about you, Cam?
Not at all.
All right. Hit us with
It's
your
on
next
Game
one,
Pass.
Frank.
It might be worth the download.
There you go.
And then yeah, one of my last ones, because like I said, I don't want to go through too many, but I did play through Yakuza 6 and Yakuza 7, Like a Dragon, this last year. And those were also some incredible games. They're both really good, and they both are like really fun, great stories, kind of just everything I love about the Yakuza games. And I'm glad to be like caught all the way up on the entire series. And I'm super excited for the two that are coming out this year. So yeah, like it's just so wild that over the last couple of years I played through that entire series, and I still need to play the Judgment games, which I'm going to try to this year, hopefully. But I also don't want to burn myself out, like kind of like I did too, because like playing through a lot of them back to back, like these are very dense games.
Yeah. Because my 2021 was Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2. And then I was like, all right, I think I've probably played enough, because I was all doing that because I'd heard such great things about Like a Dragon, and was like, all right, I'm going to skip ahead to Like a Dragon. Loved that game. It would have been easily in my top like 3 if I'd played it the year it came out, but I was playing it, 6 months later, something like that. I loved, especially, I had such an appreciation having played the first few games, obviously
Mhm.
way more action focused, of how well so many elements of the games translated into the turn-based RPG, JRPG stuff that they embraced with Like a Dragon. Had a ton of fun with it. Yeah.
Yeah, like that stuff hits so well. Like they were able to transition it super well, and I really like the action based stuff, and I kind of prefer that. But I also don't mind the like JRPG kind of like the way they've shifted, because it does work really well. And if anything, they'll only get better at like making those, kind of like they only got better at doing like the fighting combat. And then they're still going to do the fighting combat in like side games and like the Judgment series and stuff. So I'm still going to be able to get a little bit of that. And but yeah, like 7 has such an amazing story, and like the characters are really awesome. And I loved the addition of like the Bartok like kind of like mini game where you kind of like go up like social ranks with your party members. Like I really enjoyed a lot of those moments and conversations and stuff. And then even the overall story is like really good. So I mean, I recommend the whole series, but yeah, even if people just start with 7, like 7's a really good game too.
Plus, some of the best Final Fantasy-esque summons, like better than any Final Fantasy game. You can summon a crab, or you can summon just a whole bunch of former Yakuza bosses that will just come and mow down your enemies for one bad cop guy that you're fighting on the street or something like that. Like it's so crazy and over top, and it brings all of the Yakuza madness to a JRPG, which was so much fun.
And it has not to go on it for too long, but it has so many good references to the series too. Like with like even enemies, like there's like a fighting coliseum, and a lot of the enemies you only find there are like weird callbacks to like side quests in past games. And then there's a lot of side quests that are even callbacks to actual other side quests too, but now you get to experiencing it because you're like a new guy, you're Ichiban instead. So it's like it's just they have a lot of fun with the universe and like messing around with some of those characters, and I really like that.
Yeah, I love like the RC or the go-kart mini game.
Yep.
Is like it's the same. It's run by the same guy who did the RC
Pocket
games,
Circuit Fighter.
Pocket Circuit stuff. Yeah, in the earlier games, it was very much like a. Having played the first few games, I appreciated the references I caught, and then there were like a ton of moments where I was like, "That's probably a reference from 3, 4, 5, or 6 that I'm missing," but it's probably like somebody's probably popping really hard for this.
Yeah,
very cool. Is that it or any more?
I'll throw one more in. I didn't want to do too many on this, but I did play one other really good game this year, and I played that Resident Evil 2 remake, and that is just a banger. Like, I know people, I don't think I've ever actually heard anybody say anything like bad about that game, but I had a really great time with that game. As I've only played some of the Resident Evils and a lot more of the modern ones because the old ones just didn't really do it for me. But this remake of 2 is like really great from the ground up, where like it's really fun to play. I love the puzzle aspects of it. Like, I love being in the police station, and then like there's this whole crazy quest where I'm like, oh, I got the roll of film and I developed it, and then there's a statue in here, and oh, and then I got to put the book in this from the library in the statue's hand, and then he gives me a jewel, and then I can look at that and like take it out and then put it in like a treasure chest and then get the thing inside there. And like, I love like all these like puzzle elements and getting a new thing and knowing exactly like where I need to go. It reminds me a lot of like Metroidvania, like, where it's like, oh yeah, now I can do this and now I can do that and now I can do this. And like, but it does kind of lose it for me a bit too. Like, when they always do the same thing that every Resident Evil does, where they're like, all right, cool, you've been in this one location for like the entire game. Now we're going to go somewhere new. And I'm like, but I don't like the new place as much as I like the old place, but all right, here we are. But the graphics in that game are really great, and I also wanted to give a huge shout out to the audio design, because it's like it's hearing stuff that you can't see and just kind of knowing what's around the corner or what's coming after you, especially even like Mr. X like stomping around and like throwing enemies out of the way is like, it's really cool. And it's like, I think that is also what makes a lot of that game, because I don't ever really find horror games like that scary, but yeah, I can at least appreciate a lot of like what goes into it, and even some of the tension that they try to like build,
Nice. Cam, anything to add on that? I imagine you're much more likely to have done Resident Evil stuff than me.
I actually have only ever done the intro on that game. I've watched a lot of streamers play it. I like three. I've watched three streamers like stream the entire game. So I haven't played it myself, but that was always when I was like, oh, I'll stream that for Halloween, and then it just like never happened. Might be a fun game for me to make Trevor play through as I sit co-op couch.
I played of the remake. I played like the beginning chunk. I was playing as who's the female protagonist in that one?
Claire Redfield.
So I played as her, and I got to the point where like if you're playing as Leon, right? Mr. X would start kind of like showing up. So I never had to deal with Mr. X because once I got out of the police station and started going to one of those areas where I was like, I don't like this. And also it's probably going to just get worse from here. So I'm going to bounce off this right now. But I did check out a little bit of it. And yeah, also it definitely does that thing of like, I don't like this feeling. I don't want to do this. Because I do not like those kinds of jump scares and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I'm sure now that Cam and I are living together, I'm sure he will make me play a number of things that I don't want to necessarily play for the content hashtag.
A lot of these Soulsborne games.
Yeah. All right. Well, if that is it for your honorable mentions, I will quickly burn through some of mine. We already talked about Live Alive. Escape Academy was an honorable mention of mine this year. Just a really fun like puzzle game, which is like I don't get a ton of those, and so when we do, it's always fun to get to like hop in, check them out. It was another Game Pass game, so I was like, cool, this is awesome. I basically started out, and then end of the year I was like, I want to go and finish that game up. Let me do that. And it has like a great hint system, so if you do feel like you're getting stuck in a place, you can kind of like, it'll give you kind of like gradually more specific hints of what you need to do next, but usually like it'll kind of be like, hey, check this thing that you maybe picked up, and if that doesn't solve it for you, it'll be like, okay, put that thing in this place or something like that. But yeah, it's lots of fun, just like escape room type things as you would expect from an Escape Academy. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is an honorable mention of mine. It might be on somebody else's list, so
yeah, I have it on mine.
All right, then we will talk about it a little later. Lego Brick Tales was a fun little variation of a Lego game. It wasn't from TT Games, so it wasn't like the action movie stuff that like Skywalker Saga was. But it was the interesting thing about it was like, it was much more of a like freeform. Here's a challenge. You need to build a bridge to get to the next place, but it's like a bridge constructor kind of thing. So it has to be stable, and you have to like build it. And here are your piece limitations that you have to work with, and kind of so you have to like. There's a lot of like puzzle solving in how you were building the Lego stuff. So that was right up my alley. Also, I'm like I think number 2 or number 3 or number 4 platinum on that
Nice.
game. I played it early and I raced through it and got the platinum very early. So shout out to that. And then last one I'll throw in here for honorable mention was Rogue Legacy 2. This was the game I played heavily on my Steam Deck when I got my Steam Deck, and it was a perfect game for the Steam Deck, just like the first Rogue Legacy was perfect on my Vita back in the day. It was a fun evolution of the Rogue Legacy stuff. Had a lot of fun, like exploring all the new like traits, I guess, the new generational traits that you get across the characters, as well as like just all the new classes that you can pick up as you go. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. Had a great time with it. Made it basically like beat the game, and then like once you beat the game, you can kind of like do the super giant thing, or super giant, where like you can toggle on like more difficult things and basically start a new playthrough with like enhanced thing. Didn't bother continuing on with that, but still had a ton of fun with Rogue Legacy 2 when I did play it. So I think that'll do it for honorable mentions, and let's dive into our number 10s. So Cam, we will throw it back to you. What is your number 10 game of the year?
My number 10 game of the year is Pokemon Legends Arceus.
It's nowhere on my list. How about you, Frank?
Nope. Yeah, not on mine. I haven't played it.
All right. Hit us, Cam. Tell us about Pokemon Legends Arceus.
So this is a Pokemon game where you run around in an open world, open maps of a world, and it's like feudal Japan. You're dressed up like a ninja as you're going around throwing Pokeballs and having your Pokemon fight stuff. It is based around a different concept than the traditional Pokemon games, where it has like sectioned out by gyms. Instead, each region is ruled by a Lord of the Land, which is a alternate version of an already existing Pokemon. That's kind of like its feudal era inspired design. The most popular one is Weird Year is for Stantler. It's like a weird version of Stantler that you can like ride around on. And then there's also other ones like Arcanine. Arcanine and Growlithe are stylized quite differently. They have big poofy hair, and I love them. It's a really good game. It's solid. It's a solid evolution of the Pokemon formula in a way that is unique. I hope they continue it as a series, because I think it makes a great palate cleanser for the more gym-based traditional badges, or the traditional Pokemon games. Granted, I have not played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and I've heard they've mixed up that quite a bit. So I'll have to check that out at some point in the next year. But for right now, I have to say Pokemon Arceus is in fact my top 10, number 10.
Excellent. Yeah, I've left the Pokemon games behind, but between Arceus and the more open worldy kind of vibe that Scarlet and Violet had, this was probably the closest I came to like revisiting the games. And then also, as I was like unpacking and putting everything out and getting my analog, like basically game, like modern Game Boy kind of thing, and like pulling out all of my old Pokemon games, I'm like, oh, do I want to get back into a Pokemon? Nope, I'm gonna hold off. But it was close. The Siren's Call was there this year, but I did not pull the trigger on that. But I'm glad you had a good time with Pokemon Legends Arceus. Frank, hit us with your number 10 game of the year.
Yeah, so this one kind of narrowly making my list because there were still a couple more games I wanted to get to that I wasn't able to, but I did like this one for some certain aspects of it. It's Midnight Fight Express. This was kind of like my friend Pedro. This is totally like one of those like Hotline Miami style, like Katana Zero style games, but it's actually more like 3D. It's not full 3D, but it's more like that, like kind of like 3D top down, where like it's kind of like zoomed out and you're kind of just running through levels and you have to eliminate everyone in the level to kind of like keep it going. And it reminds me a lot of Hotline Miami, and there's a lot of fun to be had, but it's definitely not as good as Hotline Miami or Katana Zero or even My Friend Pedro, which I had enjoyed before that. And I played this game like right when it came out, and it has like a whole story to go with it because it's like 40 levels. But I also was like painfully uninterested in the story, which is like I like story in games, and some of the other games on my list are just heavily narrative based. But it's just one of those where it's like a super uninteresting action movie, and I just kind of wanted to go around and hit dudes with like pipes and guns and stuff. Um, because it has a lot of that where you're like scavenging weapons off the ground like Hotline Miami, and you're just kind of making do with what you can to get through a situation. And it's super fun where like there's a lot of like some jokes and references too. Like there's a level that's like a parody of the No Russian mission from Call of Duty, but you play through that is in this game. There's also one which is kind of like you're in like it's just kind of a game development studio, but it reminds me a lot of like Ubisoft, and it's like a launch party. So they're having a pillow fight inside their studio. It's like a pillow fight Nerf gun war, and then you run through just terrorizing everyone in that level. And then like there's a lot of like fun moments and stuff like that, and those are the memories that I kind of take away with it. But also the final boss is like legitimately really bad. So it's really weird where like I barely only died a little bit throughout like the whole game, and then I got to this boss on like level 39, and I just like died there a bunch, and just eventually like kept trying, and it's kind of eventually you just kind of have to get it right or figure out what they want you to do. But it's just like, yeah, they just throw you into a room with like literally a tiny conference room with just like a high like really tough enemy, and then they throw some like other spawn enemies that come in, and they're like since it's like a Hotline Miami, like it's one of those where you die in like one hit. So it can be that like area was like tough, but it felt so weird to just have this crazy difficulty spike, especially right at the end of the game where that's like one of the last things you do. And then the last level is kind of tough too, but it's like it's nothing compared to that. So it's such like a weird design thing for me that kind of almost left the game a little bit off-putting towards the end. But otherwise, it's like a fun little thing to go play through, you know.
Yeah, it's always sad when like a game you're really vibing with like just leaves such a bad taste at the end of like that came out of nowhere and wasn't fun. I remember like not to that extent, but I remember like I enjoyed Luigi's Mansion 3 enough back on the Switch. The very first game we ever reviewed for that nerdy site back when we did reviews. But like the end boss of that, I was just like banging my head against a wall for so long because it just was like it started throwing all of the bad mechanics of the game at you right at the end. And I was like, this is not how you should end your game. Bad job, Nintendo. Bad job. But cool. I don't think I'd heard of Midnight Fight Express, but I'm glad you had a good time with it this year. My number 10 is I imagine on nobody else's list as well. Disney Dreamlight Valley. Basically, I will argue, or I will cede that some of the games that are probably higher on my list are immeasurably. No, that's a completely wrong word. Just definitely better games. But this is a Trevor ass game. Disney Dreamlight Valley. Obviously, super adult fan of Lego that I am, and basically combine that with like the 600 hours of Animal Crossing that I put in a couple of years ago at the beginning of the pandemic. This is still a game I check in pretty much daily on. I wish they were more frequent with like updates and stuff, but they are continuing to support the game, and they just announced like a roadmap for basically the next few months. And so it's fun. They're like, apart from the very specific trophies that I'm going after, there is no reason for me to be hopping into this game. I have more than enough money to buy everything else in the game if it was available or anything like that. But it's fun. Just a fun Disneyfied take on the genre of stuff. So shout out to Disney Dreamlight Valley as my number 10. Shoot, I forgot to take the time code for number 10s. All right, I'll have to figure that out later. Let's dive into number 9s. Cameron, hit me with your number 9.
Sure. My number 9 is Gundam Evolution. Don't imagine it's on anybody else's list. Gundam Evolution is basically, what if we took Gundams and made them do Overwatch things? It's a really fun game. I think that there are some, my critiques on it are pretty straightforward. I think there is still a little bit of control issues as far as just like maneuverability and stuff go. It's everybody kind of moves almost the same, if not very close to each other. The only differences are the more high mobility mobile suits, which are fun to play, but there just really isn't enough diversity among it, and to balance out like for more melee focused Gundams, they've made them very, very powerful and strong. But there's some balancing issues, and then on top of that, the shooting is not as fun as other games. You're shooting lasers, and so you're hearing just kind of like the same laser sound over and over and over again, and you're not getting any kind of like difference between them. It makes the kind of like more specialty moves that are beam weapon related, as far as like guns go, it's pretty much the same for everybody, and it's unless it's bullets versus like. But the thing is, like, then there are bullet based weapons that sound way better, and there's just not a lot of diversity in that. And also, like, yeah, there's just like there is 150 small critiques I can give this game as to why it's only my number 9. But the biggest one I would say are really that it's just not as fun to play as other first person shooters. I think that this game still has a lot of potential. I think that the people who are still playing this game, they are it's a fun game to pick up. I think that it's free to play. Or sorry, not. I know it's free to play. And it overall, it's a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this game is at like a year from now, because if it can make it to a year from now with a lot more additional content, I really have high hopes for it. But it's really going to be this first year that it's out that it's going to have a lot of, it's going to be a bit of an uphill climb. So.
Interesting, because I remember talking with you about this game on the podcast, and we had the conversation kind of at the tail end of like, do you think this game's really just holding you over until Overwatch 2 comes out? So we ultimately curious if Overwatch 2 ends up making your list down the line. Because I remember you enjoying the game. I didn't think it would have been like a top 10 game for you though. So cool. I'm glad you had such a good time with it in your time. Have you gone back to the game? Or was it really just kind of that initial flurry of stuff?
I've gone back a few times. I'm kind of like not in a first person shooter type mood right now. I haven't been over like the last month. I
know how I see how much Elden Ring you're playing. I know.
That's fair. No, but it's also like other games. Like I'm just much more in an RPG kind of mood right now. Part of it is also just like the amount of effort that it takes to play at a higher, like especially with like anything that has competitive ranking that I like to play. I have to be in the right mood for it, otherwise I don't do well, and that frustrates me and I get tilted. And I'd rather not do that. Also, like basically I haven't really played a first person shooter since I moved. That's kind of like where it's been at. Like there's just a whole lot of that aspect of it that I just like, I'm in a new space and I'm not really just feeling it right now. So
not ready to let me see you rage quitting at things yet, and hearing you from across the house screaming your lungs out at a thing. Got it.
No, but there's a good shot I can I'll be stringing together like a series of curse words that when put together might shock you. I know it's shocked other people.
Fair enough. Frank, hit us with your number 9.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's on one of your guys' lists, but my number 9 is Tunic.
It is. I have it higher up on my list, so we can talk about it then. Similarly, I'm sure my number 9 is higher up on Cameron's list, because my number 9 is Vampire Survivors.
It's higher.
Yeah. So we will talk about it then. I very much enjoyed it, and I knew if I tried to play too much more of it, I would get too addicted to it, so I had to kind of set it aside. But it does a great job of the that endorphin drip constantly in that game that we will talk about later. All right, nice little quick round there. Make up some time here. Cameron, hit us with your number 8.
My number 8 is Eiyuden Chronicle Rising.
Nice. That was I had it in like it's basically right actually between Lego Brick Tales and Rogue Legacy 2 in my honorable mentions, but I wanted to give those two more of a shout out. So I'm glad that we get to circle back around to this. So tell us about Eiyuden Chronicles Rising.
This game is fantastic. Granted, like as always, I'll put a disclaimer, like I did or rather I backed 100 Heroes, the game that this is a prequel to. Rising is a stretch goal that they hit, and so they put it out, and it is basically a sample of the mechanics and technology that you're going to see in the game. As far as like, when I say technology, I mean like the kind of like game engine that they're using, the kind of storytelling, voice acting, character, like the way that This game is heavily emphasized on like maneuverability and different characters' maneuverability, as well as just their overall action points, like what they use for weapons.
And for those that don't know, this is basically behind the creative minds behind the Suikoden, the early Suikoden games. So it's kind of that spiritual successor as well.
And not just the creative minds. If you watch their promo video for their studio, it's almost everybody who was involved in those games is back for this one. They all joined together to make. They're like, we all want to make another Suikoden game, so we're going to leave to make our own studio to do it.
Konami's not doing it, so we're going to. Yeah.
Yep, that is the mentality. So a great studio with just a great group of people around it. I still get like, I don't pay attention to the updates, but they send out regular updates and have for years. So like they are fantastic. I have a lot of love for them. This game is a snippet of what's to come, and that makes me very excited because what's to come looks very, very good. The humor, the earnestness of this world and this characters as they're up against kind of like this, like, you know, the faceless empire type trope is just like, you just need these plucky, fun energy characters, as well as some like more serious or dour ones. Like there's a good group of people in this game, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this kind of storytelling of this world that they've built up, as well as just it's so much fun to play. Only reason it's not higher is because it's not longer. It's a pretty short game, but absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I really enjoyed like I played through, beat the whole game kind of thing. Didn't do like, I think there's like end game stuff that I could have gone and done, but I had a ton of fun with it, and it'll be interesting to see how the like proper game turns out, because this is very much like you have like a party of 3 characters. You're probably meeting a bunch of other characters that will be in the proper game and kind of getting like the introduction to, because this weekend in games are of course like you get like a party of hundreds that you can, you know, pick and choose who you want to join, and that's what the next one will eventually be. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, simple in like a lot of it is like, hey, do a fetch quest for me, and you know, we'll level up some stuff. There's a fun like town building element where you're kind of like upgrading the town by doing the quests and stuff like that. And yeah, it was just a lot of like cool, fun stuff. Like the reason it's not higher on my list is I played it and then pretty much forgot about it like afterwards, and so it was like as I was going through kind of like ranking everything I played at the end of the year, I was like, oh yeah, okay, did I like that better than this? I don't really remember. Like I had a good enough time with it, but I don't have like, there was nothing like incredibly strong that like called me back to the game or made me think about it. But yeah, it definitely wasn't as like, it definitely wasn't offensive or bad as some of the other games that I played were. So shout outs to Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. Any last thoughts there, Kim, before we move on?
Yeah. If you think that, so we are going to be like a couple of us are publishing our lists from this year. My published list this year will be Game of the Year, and you had better believe the Photoshops are making their way back. The one for Eiyuden Chronicle Rising is particularly good. It was a little tricky, but I made it work, and it's pretty good. I'm not exactly proud of it, but
yes, you are. That's why you're talking about it.
I'm proud of it. Yeah, I spent way too much time on it. I should not have spent that much time doing it, but man, it was fun.
Good luck, or goody. All right, Frank, hit us with your number 8.
Yeah, so my number 8 is going to be a Trek to Yomi.
Did this end up making your list there, Cameron?
It did not. It did not. It didn't even make my honorable mentions. I had some real issues that I think I've talked about on the podcast before, but that's not what I'm here. That's not what we're here to talk about. Frank, go for it.
Yeah, gush away, Frank.
Yeah, like, because it's an interesting game because, like, I think it, like, the first thing that came to my mind, and I think a lot of people's when they debuted it and were showing it off, is you're like, oh, this is kind of like Ghost of Tsushima, but it's like 2D. And this game definitely does not play anywhere near as good as Ghost of Tsushima does. And that's like, and it's fair when I was thinking about it earlier, because it's like, yeah, this is like a really tiny team probably, and they're just kind of making this really cool, like, fun indie game. But besides the fact that it doesn't play like amazing, I still thought it was like a fun 2D side scroller that it's like this samurai Kurosawa kind of film. The whole game's in black and white, and there's even a couple like really cool moments where, since it's like a 2D side scrolling game, they can kind of control what you're seeing. And there's times where it's almost like full set pieces from like Kurosawa, like samurai films, where you're just kind of like inside a room and there's a bunch of people who are behind like the straw kind of like sheets, and like you can see their shadows, and like there's a lot of really cool like moments and fights and kind of cinematic things they do, that I thought it was really fun. It's also kind of short, which you could probably expect, being it's like such a small indie game. But it's even kind of surprised me when I hit the end, and I thought there would be a lot more to keep going. And yeah, and then my biggest downside of it, to me at least, is the combat. Is like, I don't think it's like amazing, like it's passable. It's like it's definitely there and it definitely works, but I wish it would have been like better or more technical. But I guess it's not necessarily like the game they wanted to go for.
Very fair. Yeah, I was, I believe, probably the first of us to check this one out because I played basically like when it came to Game Pass, and like it the thing I will say for it that I loved is the style, and that it goes all in on that like black and white Kurosawa style thing. The gameplay and the story didn't match those levels for me, so I didn't really think about it much beyond that. But it was very much like a, hey Cam, like you played Ghost of Tsushima in Kurosawa mode. This feels like a Cam-ass game. I think Cam ultimately kind of came away with the same kind of thoughts in terms of like combat and story as I did. But yeah, it's like I love that they took such a big swing with the style of the game, and hope they continue to kind of like evolve and come up with the evolution of their design stuff, because it definitely like has a great look and feel to it, in terms of like cinematic stuff. But yeah, I was just kind of like never got drawn into the characters, and the combat just isn't my cup of tea in terms of like side scroller, hack and slash, pseudo Souls-esque kind of stuff, in terms like depending on difficulty settings and stuff like that you're playing with. Like there were definitely some fights where it was like very brutal, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go down to like whatever the beginner easiest mode is and just try and push through. So Cam, anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, I will say I think that it really embraced the Kurosawa style quite a bit, and especially I liked the kind of I don't want to spoil anything from the game, but I will say that the mechanics of how they approached the end game were interesting in a way, narratively anyway. The way they kind of presented it and set it up, and you had like the kind of like things that were going on, and so I think the way that they approached it that way was interesting. But overall, yeah, I think it's a plenty fun game. If you have Game Pass, I definitely think you should check it out.
Cool. Any final thoughts from you, Frank? Yeah.
Yeah, all three of the bottom games on my list I played on Game Pass.
I mean, it was a great year for Game Pass. Like a lot of
was.
the games on my list. Like, I mean, yeah, like Tunic was there. Yeah, a few of my, I mean, Vampire Survivors I played on Game Pass. A few of my upcoming games were Game Pass games, and then like, yeah, a lot of the honorable mention stuff. It was a great like opportunity to check out a lot of these games, and like, yeah, I played Trek to Yomi on Game Pass, and it's one of those things like, I'm only out my time. I didn't have a great time with this. I don't think it makes my top 20 even, but I didn't like, I didn't feel like, oh, I was sold on the trailer, so I'm going to go buy this game. It was, I got to check it out on Game Pass. Wasn't for me, but I don't regret that I spent a couple days playing through it instead of other things. I would have maybe been a little more bummed if I'd poured, money into buying it or something and then didn't like it. But it's, yeah, Game Pass as kind of like the no hassle demo. Because if I'd wanted to, yeah, I could have bounced off at any time, no problem. So yeah, shout out to Game Pass, especially there were long stretches of the year I felt like where Game Pass was what was getting me through and what was getting me to check out stuff, especially for doing Let's Plays Tuesdays and Thursdays. I was like, I don't know what to try and play. Let me go find something on Game Pass. Anyway,
that's why I did the same thing, because that's why I played a lot of the games that came out this year through Game Pass, and then there was a bunch of random stuff that was just older that I was just like, yeah, let me check this out. And there's the list of games I played, I tracked everything, even if I played it for like 20 or 30 minutes. And yeah, there's so many games I checked out and was just like, nope. And yeah, it's like, there's no harm. Like I played that game, The Pedestrian, the one where you're running through street signs.
Yeah, I played that at the beginning of the year too. Again, it was
Yeah.
like a prior year kind of thing, so I didn't consider it for anything. But yeah, it was very much the same kind of like, oh, it's on Game Pass. I remember seeing that. I want to check that out. Cool. I played, first few levels of it, and I was like, all right, it's fun. Gonna bounce off to something else.
Yep.
Nice.
Same. Yeah, I played the first level and then I was like on to the next thing. And then I played Kill It With Fire for like 5 hours because that game was really fun.
Yeah, I did that one too. Basically a precursor to Power Wash Simulator later in the year. Well, my number 8 is Bear and Breakfast. Is one of the last games
nice.
I played in 2022. I remember seeing like the trailer for it at like some indie thing a few years ago or something like that. Finally came out this year, and it was like on my Steam list, constantly like reminding me and being like, "Hey, this is on sale. Don't forget, you want to try buying it?" And I was like, "All right, end of the year, yeah, I'm gonna pick this up." And got lost in it for like the last week of the year or something. I had a great time with it. I did that I did that week of like, here are games I want to play for consideration at end of the year. And it was the one until Cameron moved in and we started doing more Elden Ring that I went back to the most. It is a fun little like town builder kind of thing, except instead of like towns, you are building bed and breakfasts, and you basically like, you're a bear, you talk to a mechanical shark that says like, hey, we want to open an Airbnb kind of thing. I don't remember what their name for it is, but it's basically like Bear B&B is almost what they probably would have called this game. But yeah, then you start with one thing and it's basically like, all right, build out a room and get guests to start coming and visiting, and then you take the resources that you get from guests visiting to upgrade stuff. There are like lots of little mini quests and side quests and stuff. Then you start expanding into other areas, and so you get you go from like your little cabin in the woods shed to a little motel that you can kind of like restore to a farmhouse to, and then yeah, you just kind of like keep adding more and more and more. It got to a point where I was like, all right, I'm trying to juggle too many things now, and I'm gonna bounce off. But I had so much fun with this, and it was very much like a kind of like almost start. Well, there are also like farming elements of okay. It introduces midway through the game. Okay, now people are going to be expecting like the breakfast part of a bear and breakfast, and so you can either buy supplies from certain places, or you can farm crops and stuff like that, and then you're gonna need to build a kitchen in one of your B&Bs and like cook up food and leave it in like a buffet table for the guests to kind of come and pick at and stuff like that. And so and then you'll get like guests who are like, I want to be in a super hygienic kind of situation. You kind of have to like place them to suit their needs in the different configurations. And so yeah, it's a lot of fun. Shout out to the team that had like such a fun little quirky idea and ran with it and executed on it very, very well. Had a lot of fun with Bear and Breakfast, my number 8 game of the year. Moving on to number 7. Cameron, hit me with your number 7.
My number 7 game of the year is a game we already mentioned earlier. It's Overwatch 2.
All right.
This is a big turnaround. I'm sure people, if they ever knew about my top 10 game of the year I did with Irrational Passions, 5-6 years ago? Overwatch
would have been 2016.
Yeah, it would have been 2016. Overwatch 1 beat out Stardew Valley, even of all games. Like, I was so high on Overwatch 1, and that's carried through to this day. Like, I think Overwatch is just fantastic. The problem that I have, and the reason why I couldn't rank it any higher, is because Overwatch 2 is half a game. Overwatch 2 is a long-promised expansion. So I've gone into so much detail about what makes Overwatch 2 different from Overwatch 1. If you like go back, listen to like our podcasts in October, I've talked about it very extensively, so I won't reiterate that here. But the biggest thing about that was the selling point about Overwatch 2 was that it was going to finally give people what they wanted out of a single-player campaign. That campaign is still a work in progress. That is not out yet. And the changes and things that have been made are fantastic, but and this is something of a trend for me, is that I'm not as impressed with reiterations or doing something just a little bit better than the last time. And it is better than than Overwatch 1 vanilla, like the base one it was. But it doesn't change the fact that like this game also had a very long protracted beta that was the central point of the last season of Overwatch League. It was like we have everything that's happened with Blizzard. But when it comes down to this game and the people who made it and the effort that was put behind it, like I put all of that other stuff aside and just really looked at the bones of this game and asked the question, is this better than Overwatch 1? Like, is this impactful as Overwatch 1 was for me? And the answer is no. It just couldn't be. But that's still being considered. I still think very highly of this game. I think it's fantastic. This is just a very much a stacked year where other games just, because not even technically, really realistically speaking, this is half a game. This is half of the game that was promised. And I'm like, I can't, like, we have whole games that have come out this year. Games that said, hey, we're going to put out a game, and they put out the entire game, not half the game or just the multiplayer of that game. And it all kind of goes into that, like a lot of feelings I have and frustrations I have about other stuff aside. I think that everything really comes down to in this moment for me of when I was writing my list out is this game better than the other games that came out this year? Like the 6 other games that I have on my list. And the answer to that question is no, it's not.
Well, that meets the criteria of ranking, so that's fair. I mean, I don't think you're alone in that at all, given that like Overwatch, the first one when it came out, ended up winning Game of the Year that year, and I feel like Overwatch 2 wasn't even in the conversations for Game of the Year. I feel like a lot of people were like, hey, this is, I mean, especially like realizing, the first one was 2016. It's like, hey, you guys had 6 years. Obviously there was, continued development on the first Overwatch game, but like Overwatch 2 has been in development for 6+ years, and this is what they've come out with. I obviously can't speak to it personally because I didn't check it out, but it very much was, when they announced that there will be a single player campaign mode kind of thing, I was like, oh, okay, and it's free to play. I enjoyed like the characters of Overwatch enough. I'm never going to be jumping into matches and stuff like that because it's just not my kind of game. But if there's like a single player campaign I can check out and enjoy the mechanics and the characters and stuff like that, sure. And then that did not come out, and we'll see when it does if I actually end up hopping into it or not. But sorry that it ended up being disappointing. But I'm glad it's at least still good enough to be in your Game of the Year conversation here at number 7. Any final thoughts there, Cam?
Yeah, final thoughts is this. Overwatch as a property is the most underutilized property that's ever existed. This game, when their first trailer came out, people were so blown away by it, and they're like, they're definitely gonna make like Pixar stuff, like style movies about like with this. And there was there have been such missed opportunities that like just like a shelved like periodically released Overwatch story material, despite the fact that like the creative team behind it of the original Overwatch had like a library full of it that is like most of it's just like been lost or whatever in staff shuffling. Like there's a lot of stuff that's happened that is just total mismanagement of Blizzard in general, I think. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I think there's just an evidence of general mismanagement from Activision's leadership down to the people actually running Blizzard themselves. And I think we saw that emphasized by the scandals that came out, and seeing a lot of that leadership forced into exile, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we talked about that as well. Of like, in a year where we got like Arcane coming out, we got Cyberpunk Edge Runner. Like this year, as we're recording this, basically the latest the Billstown episode of Last of Us is on right now. Basically, we're gonna have to circle back to, like we're in an era where the game stuff can be made with a good quality, and I think there's probably an element at EA, or not EA, Activision, that is probably like, we don't want to pour money into this because we already got burned with Warcraft. And so, yeah, they're probably like a little gun shy on doing that, but maybe they'll turn that around and actually start utilizing the IP. Who knows? Frank, hit me with your number 7 game of the year.
Yeah, so my number 7 is Shredder's Revenge.
Cool. Yeah, as I said, honorable mention. So hit us with your Shredder's Revenge thoughts.
Yeah, I thought this game was really fun. Like, I only played the like side-scrolling beat 'em up games so much, and a lot of the ones I have played have been the older TMNT games, like Turtles in Time, which is a great and SNES game. I'm sure many people are familiar with, and that's kind of like the vibe of what I think they really went for here. But it's kind of just like a really updated, modern take. And I thought the graphics were good. It's a fun soundtrack. It's just a fun game, like overall, kind of going through this like overworld kind of like map, and then kind of like picking the different like levels, and then I was fortunate enough to actually play it with couch co-op with two other of my friends. So having three people together is with the turtles. We didn't have the full four, but we had three. And then that was just fun. And then unlocking, there's like a lot of different modes that you can unlock, and even different characters. Where eventually, after we beat the game, we unlock Casey Jones, and then you get to like, it's just fun to be able to play with like all these different characters and fight all these different bosses, and even some weird deep cuts that even I'm like, I don't know who this is. like I feel like they went deep for some of that stuff. But it was just a fun like experience overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up with like the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. By the time the like Turtles in Time came out, that was probably like a little bit past my days in the arcade and stuff with friends, but like those early ones were a ton of fun. And this just, I mean, it's so many of the same team behind like Scott Pilgrim, the beat 'em up, and it very much felt that, and it felt great, and it was so much fun, even doing like single player and kind of like running through those things, except for when there was like a thing where it's like, okay, to fight this boss you have to throw an enemy at the screen, and I like
Yeah.
just did
Oh
not
God.
understand
Yeah.
that for the longest time. So I'm like, what do I do? I can't, I'm like, this fight's just going forever, until I finally realized that that's what I need to do and how to do that routinely. But even that, one of the other games that I checked out this year didn't make any of my lists or anything because it was not really like eligible, so to speak. But I did pick up the Cowabunga collection,
Mhm.
which is a wonderful like collection of old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, and I played a bunch of those. And like playing Turtles in Time, I think there is where that like boss is very much inspired and drawn from. It's the same kind of mechanic of, okay, you got to throw something at the screen to take out the enemy and do stuff like that. So it had so much love and care, and yeah, deep cut references all over the place.
Yep.
And it was so much fun. Great, incredible soundtrack, ton of fun there. It's very much it is one of those games that playing through myself, I was like, this would be such a fun game to do as a couch co-op kind of let's play. And so it's on my list now that Cam and I live together. Once we get a setup that is like accommodating for that, I have like a collection of games that I want to circle back around to and be like, hey, okay, I played this as a single player thing. Let's play it again. The way it's supposed to be played kind of thing. So yeah, shout out to that. And yeah, just like top of the line 2D scrolling beat 'em up. Some of the things, like some of the challenges in the levels are like,
Oh,
fuck
yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah, don't get hit.
exactly. Like one of the first levels is like, all right, you got like, there's 3 challenges on every level. And yeah, one of the first ones is like, don't get hit. What? how are you supposed to get through this entire level without being hit once? No, not gonna, like, I'm never gonna be that guy. Screw you, Shredder's Revenge. That's the real Shredder's Revenge, is those challenges. Very cool. I'm glad you really enjoyed that one. And yeah, it was definitely like it is, I want to say like 13 on my list, so it just misses the top 10. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that one. And there was a good chunk of the year where it was in my top 10 because I was kind of keeping the list ranked more or less as I was going throughout the year. So it just got knocked out by some of the late year submissions.
I have to say, I had a very unique experience getting to play this game. So I didn't play the entire game. That's why it's not on my list at all. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have put it up there. I didn't get to play the entire game because the people who I was playing this game with are children, and they decided to play ahead of me and finish the game. My nieces
Wow.
and nephew that I lived with before moving in with Trevor, who, funny if we were able to push back this podcast so I could have dinner with them. Thank you guys very much for that, by the way. Are the kids that I played it with. These are kids who have never played or had no interest in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They just knew, oh, this is a game like mom and dad and Uncle Cam used to play when they were kids. And like, cause my sister and I and her husband, we all have memories of playing the old arcade game. at like the movie theater and stuff. And so for us, it was like a great way for like all of us to like at different times we were playing different levels, and it was just we all had a blast just playing it. And then the three adults were very surprised when the kids played played through it without them. It was a really fun memory that I had of this year, and I can't wait to kind of like do that again with Trevor. So very excited for that.
Very cool. My number 7, I don't think is going to be on anybody else's list, but it is Nobody Saves the World. This was the latest game from Drinkbox Studios of Guacamelee and Severed fame. It hit Xbox Game Pass like way back at the beginning of the year, and I had so much fun with this. This is a ton of fun. It is a hack and slash game, but a wild hack and slash game where you are the nobody, but you have this like magical ability to like change your shape and turn into different forms. And so like, you the first one you get introduced to is like a rat, and so you turn into a rat, and so it makes you small. You can get into places that you couldn't get, and then you have like a bite attack and a poison attack and stuff like that. And as you level up, you get new abilities, and then you also start getting new forms, and eventually you can start like mixing and matching things. And there's just so much fun creativity, and the game does a great job of like giving you quests to encourage that creativity, where it'll be like, okay, as the horse, equip this bodybuilder ability so you can basically just knock people across the map kind of thing. And like so many of the combinations ended up being like wildly satisfying and stuff. And then beyond that, it's like it's a Zelda-like game in terms of like you're going through an overworld map, you're going from kind of point to point, solving quests, going into dungeons. There are a whole bunch of like miscellaneous extra dungeons, which are often just like a puzzle to be solved. Like, there'll be one that's basically like, all right, every hit in this dungeon, both the ones you do and the ones enemy do, does 9,999 damage. And so that will normally kill you unless you get an ability that basically is like, all right, no single hit will kill you. You will like endure basically. And so you have to like have that ability equipped in order to like progress through that dungeon, or you have to like, I mean, there are probably other solutions to those kinds of things, but it ends up being just very fun. I almost 1,000 pointed it on Xbox. The only achievement I didn't get was the like play it through again, or like play it through New Game Plus. And basically the reason I didn't do that was like, all right, well, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to wait until I play it on PlayStation to do that. And so this is another game that is absolutely on my list because there is a co-op mode. And so like playing it single player, you come up with like crazy wild combinations. So if you have two nobodies going around, both of you doing like, completely complementary things, you could probably just wreck shop and just like explode the map basically, because with all the enemies that you can just be killing based on complementary skills and stuff like that. So it's definitely one that when the time comes, I will pick up on PlayStation and run through some of this with Cam and have some fun. So shout out to Nobody Saves the World and just the always great team over at Drinkbox. They do not miss for me. So moving on to number 6s. Cameron, hit me with your number 6.
I think we can go past mine because I believe it'll be higher up on other people's list. It is Horizon Forbidden West.
That is indeed higher on my list. Cool. Then Frank, hit me with your number 6.
Mine might be higher on someone else's list, but my number 6 is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion.
I didn't count it. It would be another honorable mention for me. I didn't count it because I had played it back on the Vita. Obviously, still a great game, but it is just like pretty much just the Vita port with better graphics. So I didn't really like include it in my. It would be in my like games I replayed kind of game of the year list. But absolutely, let's talk Crisis Core.
PSP, by the way, Trevor.
PSP. Sorry, you're correct. Yeah, this I'm so old.
It's not on my list because I didn't get to play it because I was broke.
That's fair.
I bought it digitally. Otherwise, you could buy I'd let you play my copy. But yeah, tell me your Crisis Core thoughts, Frank.
I really like this game. I never really got to play the PSP version, even though I'm super familiar with it. And of course, I already know that ending, which I would honestly just say is even like iconic. But like, so I already knew a ton about this game going in, but I've never got to play it. And I'm glad that this exists because it kind of got that off of being stuck on PSP. And I've thought about even just getting the PSP version for a long time too. So I'm glad that like it is off of there and onto these like new next gen consoles, and it does have better graphics and it plays a little bit better. And there's a couple other things that are like quality of life improvements that I enjoyed. But the weird thing about it that holds it back for me too of why it's not even higher is because this is definitely just a PSP game. Like even on PS5, like it looks great. I feel like they even already had a lot of the assets just from 7 Remake that they're like even still using. But like it's still a good fun game, and I even enjoyed the gameplay for even how like it's a lot even more basic even than like 7 Remake was with like the materia system and like fusing materia and combining stuff. Like I felt like it was a lot more in depth and more interesting in 7 Remake. And the it's also very short, which is like I think understandable because it is a PSP game, but I wouldn't have minded if they actually did what they did for like 7 Remake and went in and made things like longer and like added more things because especially story wise, they definitely just jump forward, and there's times where there's even like time skips, even if it's just a couple weeks or a couple months, but it's never very clear like how much time has like gone by between things, except for like people will meet in one cutscene and then like 10-15 minutes later after like one mission they're like, yeah, we're best friends and we've been running these missions together for months. And I'm just like, okay, wow, all right, like I missed a lot in the last 10 minutes. Like and that's honestly the biggest downside for me is just and then there's even like these small little missions you can go on which are fun, but they're all like super quick, like less than like a lot of them are less than like 5 minutes. And that it is a handheld game that they have just like kind of like blown up and made prettier. But I wish they had like actually changed a lot more and did some other things, especially because a lot of the writing in the VO and stuff is the VO is new, but the writing is old. So it's like a lot of it just like, yeah, the like characters and the storylines and stuff, a lot of the stuff is not as like good as I would have like wanted it to be, especially after 7 Remake, which is like my main comparison to this specifically.
Yeah, I was very glad that this game came out because after playing 7 Remake, I was like, I would love to go back and like revisit Crisis Core and play Zach's story, but yeah, I'm not going to bust out my PSP, not Vita, to try and do so. Even though, yeah, I still have the game over here on my shelf. And so yeah, when it got announced, I was like, yes, great, I can't wait. And then yeah, hopping into it, it is okay if you don't do all of like the padding missions that are very much designed to add content to this game or to serve the PSP audience of like, okay, it's designed for people taking the subway or something like that. Do it like playing a few missions on your commute, and then like and being able to do that without like affecting the storyline or something like that. Because yeah, if you just play the story stuff on this, it's a very quick game. But playing through it, especially because I went through 100% of it, I got the platinum on it. It was, and I don't think I had done that the first time around. Obviously, there wasn't a platinum back in PSP, but I don't think I think I probably got burnt out on some of the mission stuff just because of like the difficulty curves and stuff like that. But I had. I had a lot of fun doing it, but yes, it is wildly repetitive, especially those missions where it is, okay, you're going into the same 6 or 7 maps basically, and they just kind of like block off different paths, but it's the exact same map every time. And so many of them are just like repetitive. You're doing the exact same thing with a slightly different enemy base or something like that. Like all of the Yuffie quests, for example, where it's just like, okay, this is the same joke for 3 quest lines of like 18 different missions and stuff like that. All right, I get it. I get her whole deal. We can move on from this. Oh, we can't? Okay, we're gonna keep doing this. All right, fine. But yeah, it was so much fun still getting to like revisit that story as rough as the stuff is, but getting to play it on the big screen and also with like the upgraded kind of assets from Remake. And yeah, it just left me very excited, especially with how Remake ends and how the DLC for Remake ends, to be like, all right, I'm very curious what they're going to do with Zach in the future. So it was great getting kind of a refresh of the character. And like I loved, the writing is still rough, but like having the Aerith and the Tifa and the Cloud from Remake in Reunion, and kind of like letting them and Sephiroth as well, like letting them kind of play their same roles, but for the like this new version of the story. I was like, yes, because I loved them all in that last game. So yeah, Reunion was a great game to tide us over until Rebirth comes out,
Yep.
presumably
At
this
the
year.
end of this
So,
year,
yeah, we'll see.
supposedly.
So great addition, but yeah, I just didn't include it in my. It would easily be an honorable mention, but yeah, I didn't include it in my ranking for the year. Yeah, Cam, anything to add?
I will say, speaking of its writing, this was the era of like Dirge of Cerberus, of like,
Yep.
I think they could have taken that Japanese script and done another translation on it, to kind of like update it a bit. I think that translations that are done today are a lot more in sync and a lot more like better fleshed out. The dialogue, sorry, the language is not always a one-to-one between Japanese and English, and so there are some older translation reference points that were used back then that are no longer used today. A great way of looking at this is kind of like Persona 5, and its original dialogue before they replaced it. That's just an example. So I'm not surprised that like Dirge of Cerberus era writing isn't up to snuff for what we have today.
Well,
also,
it's
just like
for me.
yeah, also it's just like also like they like writing like the writers for Final Fantasy stuff have gotten better since then. Also, so yeah, but overall, like I can't wait to hop into this game. It's in the like it's at the top, like not at the tippity top, but it's towards the top of my list of games I'm gonna play once Moolah starts rolling in more regularly from work.
It's still one I recommend, and I think it's very fun. So I definitely recommend you check it out. But the other thing that throws me off about it, besides just the writing, is they also kept a lot of the same animations and cutscene directing. And so there's a lot of that totally just feels like, yeah, this was a PSP game, of like just the way people walk, or like they don't move, or like there's a lot of these conversations that I think some of them don't, or some of them still might have voiceover, but if you like, even if you're selecting through it, it still plays like the reaction animation, and it's totally like a PSP animation of like, what, like, and it's so overdone, and just like Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, like anime, like, and that it just feels so old. And it could be funny if you look at it like in a funny way, but it's also just like it's just, I wish they had like redone all of that, especially when you're making it like this 4K crazy game that like actually looks pretty good. It feels so weird and like held back because it was based off a PSP game.
Yeah, like all of like the FMV videos didn't get the like the love and polish that like the general game does. So it like it almost it ends up feeling like a dip back in quality, because it's, I mean, like it was that thing in Remake where like it was the realization of like, this game looks better than the Advent Children movie. And kind of that continues on here, where like the technology has made these character models look better and cleaner and smoother than the character models that are used in the FMV stuff. And so it ends up having this like weird extra like grainy texture, kind of going back in time vibe anytime you jump into one of those like cutscenes, including like the memories that play, you know, in the slots, kind of like mid combat stuff. A lot of that feels like, oh, that's a step back. But yeah, anytime you talk about like the reactions and the animations and stuff like that, I was like, oh, that's right, Zach really loves squats, and especially the missions where he goes to the beach or whatever and does, and yeah, like every time it's the exact same thing. He goes, talks to a person, they're like, oh, there's crazy things at the beach, and he goes out and like he sees the thing, it's like, and he kind of like does that same animation, and then he fights the thing and then squats, and it's like, all right, yep, that's the exact same thing six times.
And you do that 6 times.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, lots of fun, and still a fun like throwback, and absolutely worthwhile to revisit that game on like, and so it's no longer locked behind a PSP kind of like tech wall. So very cool. My number 6, I don't think is going to be higher on anybody else's list, but I could be wrong. Is Immortality.
I want to play that.
Yeah, this was one another Game Pass game that I checked out here at the end of the year. And I know Cameron checked it out after the fact, didn't really click with, but it was still fun, like having the conversations that you get to have with that game with another person. Because like I played it, and then I was like, confused, and then I played more of it and I was like, I'm really confused now, but something cool and interesting is happening, and I'm like invested, and I want to like unravel what's going on, what the story behind the story is, kind of thing. And then like just the different layers of the story in that game. And so yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. Incredible performances. Manon Gage, I totally understand why people were like gushing about her performance and the work she was doing, not only because she's playing like the actress and then also the actor in 3 different movies that you're playing, and even the actress has like different things that are happening to her, so you get just different vibes of her and all that stuff. And so yeah, it was a really cool thing. I hadn't played any of the Sam Barlow games before, like Telling Lies and kind of his other I don't remember
Her Story.
yeah, Her Story. But now I'm very like, I think from my understanding, like this is a continued evolution of that, and the fact that it is like, okay, you pause a clip and you can click basically, not anything on the clip, but you can click the specific objects you're looking to transfer at any point in the clip, basically. Like if you click on a cross, you can click on it at any point in that scene and it'll take you to a new scene to, reveal a next part of the story and stuff like that. It's just a very interesting way to tell a story that I think is really probably only I mean, it's a choose your own adventure kind of thing, but in video games in this weird and wild way. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, and it was a just really cool, interesting game that like caught me by surprise here at the end of the year. So shout out to Immortality. I don't know if you want to weigh in with any of your additional thoughts there, Cam.
Sure. Immortality is a really cool game. I think that it definitely hit for a lot of people, way more than me. Clearly, it's not even on my honorable mentions. It is, I think you like nail on the head. I think Manon Gage is her name, right? Yeah, she is phenomenal. She blew me away with just every single, like just the entire incorporation of her acting, characters, everything she did was phenomenal. Every role she had, both as like the actress as well as what the film roles were, they were phenomenal. I'm not gonna lie, like I would have watched any of the movies that way they had here, and like I would have been like, they would have been so cool. It's really like, it's so fascinating because like, man, these actually could have been like really done movies, like done that way, and they'd be really cool to watch. So like the writing on this, I think in this game is absolutely impeccable on just about every level. Both the meta level of what you're actually like finding out as you play through it, as well as the actual like writing of the meta narrative of the actors and everything and directors and everything that goes into that. And then also the actual writing of the films themselves. It's overall just like really, really cool. And I think that overall as an experience, it's pretty great. But I like it felt, this kind of a game feels more like a alternative type of experience to just like playing a game. Like it is interactive. Like I think it checks the box on like all the boxes on like what is a video game. I think it checks all those boxes, but I think this is a great example also of like a way of doing storytelling that can only really be done in video games that can't be done anywhere else. And I think on that level it succeeds on several, like there's so many layers and levels that this game succeeds on, but it just really did not hit me in the same way that I think it hit other people. And I think part of that is also I felt really rushed to play it because I was trying to play it for my Game of the Year catch-up, rather than if I had played it earlier in the year and had more time with it to like really let it sink in. But overall, I think like it like I have no contest with it being in anybody's Game of the Year list, much less I know some people it's even their Game of the Year. I think it definitely can hit that way.
Yeah, and like I said, there was especially a fun element, you playing it once you'd moved in, of like getting to like, after I've already played through it, you kind of like coming in, having these questions, and us kind of just discussing the game or discussing the game, discussing the different movie plots, discussing like the different stuff. Because it was the like, you were like, is the game just flipping through things? I was like, try doing this and see what you kind of uncover, kind of thing. And then you did that and you're like, holy shit, there's a new thing here now that we're doing. And like that happening, I tweeted about it basically to that regard.
Yeah.
But yeah, just getting to see kind of the like when you discover the thing that's happening underneath the game and stuff like that.
For me, that was the holy shit moment. I was like, oh my god, tits.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was definitely a thing that I found while recording the original Let's Play, where I was like, well, I'm gonna have to edit this video because that's not gonna go up on YouTube. But yeah, lots of fun stuff there. Trying to buy a little time because it looks like Frank is maybe having to adjust a microphone or something, or a headset or something like that.
Yeah, it looks like there's an issue with this headset.
Gotcha.
Or it's entirely. Let me check my recording, make sure that like my recording isn't like I was not just mute or silent that entire time.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
Nope, that definitely not the case. Okay.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, no, like I think overall, like the experience and like the actual like getting to talk to you about it was definitely a lot of fun. But I think that like there is something about this experience that is meant to be shared, and I think that that's also part of the message of this game. It just works across its meta narrative super well, and I think if I had been in more of that kind of like having more time to let this sink in, maybe it would have cracked my top 10. But in the kind of like rushed aspect of me playing through it, it didn't. So.
Very fair. Let's hop over to our number 5s. And fortunately, you're up next, so hopefully that'll continue to give Frank a little bit of time. But what is your number 5 game of the year?
I'm a bit curious because this might actually be on Frank's game of the year list. So we'll give him a moment for that. But let me go ahead and say it. It's Neon White. Neon White is fantastic. Is it on your list, Trevor?
No, I did not end up playing it this year.
Okay.
So Cameron's number 5 game of the year is Neon White. Is that on your list anywhere, Frank?
It is not.
It is not. All right.
All right. Neon
Cam,
White. It
go ahead
is.
and gush about Neon White.
Neon White is one of the funnest games that I played this year. It is, as far as the game goes, if we're talking like bad writing, like we just talked about with Crisis Core, this game has it in like, this is a massive throwback to like the really like god awful anime game dialogues of the past. Like it's very intentional that way. At least that's how it came off to me. With it just being like, this is a really dumb concept, but we're having fun with it, and everybody on all the voice actors are super involved in it, and they're all giving it their all. Steve Blum it's a total throwback to that because like Steve Blum voices the main character, and it's just it's so fantastic. But I think the thing that really shines about it is its gameplay and how it's about how you traverse through the world, the weapons you pick up. There are cards, and so you use these cards as different weapons. You always have your katana to cut through stuff, but guns are definitely the way that you actually want to be moving around in that game. They have like alt abilities that let you kind of like use alternative abilities rather than shooting the gun. Overall, it's just absolutely fantastic. It's an absolute roller coaster of a game, and the platforming and accuracy and platforming and every part of that matters. Traversal is super important. And you're trying to both beat the level, which there are a lot of like puzzle based elements to it, as well as you're trying to beat everybody else's time. Shout out to Barrett Courtney of Kind of Funny, because on his streams, I definitely had crushed his record after seeing how he was beating it. I was like, oh, I think that's faster than the way I did it. Going in and doing it better than him, and then in his chat saying, hey, I beat your score. And he'd check it back and I'd beat him. Like, that was always the best. Getting to top your friends' scores, trying to beat them, and then at the end of the day, Jeff Grubb just always being number one no matter what. Absolute pain in the ass, Jeff Grubb. But yeah, like it's pretty fantastic when you get through that, like all through that game, and it's a schlocky, dumb anime story, but there's a lot of heart to it. There's a lot of heart to the gameplay itself, and the traversal and the puzzle elements of the world, I think, are just top-notch fantastic. I was super intimidated by the game before I started playing because I didn't know how I would feel with like that first-person gunning on that level of platforming at that speed. And because you have to make really quick decisions very quickly. And there were times where I really surprised myself by my like how I reacted to things, what I did for those things. And just also shout out to the quick replay, like quick start back to restarting the level, like being designed into it, because it made those runs where you're trying to nail a specific kind of run on it work so well because of it. Just an absolute fantastic game. Massive love to it.
Nice. Glad you had fun with it. Yeah, every time I heard people talking about that game, the like speed run nature of it and the competitive time trial nature of it was like the selling point for them, and especially someone like Barrett, who I remember doing like Super Mario Odyssey challenges with anybody on his friends list. Of course, he's going to get sucked into something like that. I think it was pretty high up on his Game of the Year list as well.
I believe it was his game of the year.
It might have, yeah.
I will say, in regards to it, I'm normally not that kind of person. I normally don't care about leaderboards, and I normally don't care about speedrunning. Two things that are very low on like my priority for a game. And this game, that's the feature of them, and it like I was so engrossed in it, it blew me away.
Nice. Well, very cool. Frank, hit us with your number 5 game of the year.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this one is higher on anyone else's list, but my number 5 is Stray.
It is not on. It is. I did not like Stray, and I know Cameron didn't like it either. We had a big, long conversation the other day about our frustrations with how well it did in indie game stuff. But I'm glad you liked it. Tell us about Stray, Frank.
I thought it was fun. I guess it just maybe depended on what I was expecting going in, but I mean, like, I thought it was a fun little game to go. It is definitely like a cat simulator almost, where you're just walking around, and it really is just a game where you're just a cat. Like, but it has like it's a cool like dystopian world. I thought some of the things it kind of did were interesting. Some of the puzzles were kind of fun. Like, it was fun to just like some of the segments are a little bit more open, and then like one of the early areas, like there's a bunch of like side missions you can do for like side stuff, and I think a lot of that was like just fun and interesting, and a lot of the world and the story that's there I also thought was kind of interesting. It's not like a mind-blowing story, like it's not like it has any crazy like twists or turns that I really thought, or like, it's not like it went somewhere I didn't expect it going from when I started playing and kind of the story kind of started. But before going in, I really had no idea what to expect, and I thought the game's a lot different than I even thought it was going to be. But still thought it was like a fun kind of like simple thing. I do think if we're talking about it too, like the platinum, I don't think is that great because it has a time trial trophy and a couple other annoying ones. So I have like 50%.
Yeah, it is another one specifically is on a dishonorable mention in my platinum list for basically, I think I basically said whoever the early on in the game, like the first like chase sequence where you're encountering like the things that can like hurt you and stuff. There's similar to the Shredder's Revenge. There's a trophy of like, okay, get through that thing without getting touched. And I tried that for, I don't know, a couple hours, and fuck whoever authorized that as the trophy, because that's like, it's so much of it is just like random bullshit, because like things jump at you as you run around a corner and stuff like that, and then there's almost no way to avoid it. You just have to get lucky sometimes, and fuck that noise. But yeah, go ahead and continue your Stray thoughts, Frank.
No, I feel pretty much the same about the trophies, because there's a time trial one, then there's that. There's also another one where you have to go through another segment with those things without killing any of them, but you still need to do like the whole segment. Like there's just a bunch in there that I just didn't want to deal with. So that's an unfortunate thing, but it was a fun game, I thought. I feel like I don't know, I have a ton more to say on it, but it was just like a fun, cool experience, and I enjoy those Annapurna games. So, it was an interesting one this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, especially like knowing your taste in games, it doesn't surprise me that this is on your list. And I will agree, like it was fun being a cat. Like that was a fun thing. Like, I think in the Let's Play, like I jump up on a ledge and I knock over pots and stuff like that. Do the cat thing. Anytime you could go to one of those like little rest spots where you can just kind of scratch up the carpet or like the arm of a chair, I was like, yep, gonna do that. And it's oddly satisfying. For me, it was like the gameplay of it. I appreciate that like it changes up the gameplay as you like you unlock new abilities kind of thing throughout the course of the game, but it just didn't work for me a lot. And I think probably like that sequence being like an early sequence just like put a bad taste in my mouth, and I basically had to be like, all right, this is just like I'm committing now. This is not going to be a game I'm going to try and platinum, because I've like trying to get this trophy has already made me dislike this game enough that I just need to set it aside and move forward and try and enjoy like the rest of the game. Story wise, I've been thinking a lot about it recently, especially following up my recent conversation with Cameron about it. It is very Nier Automata light. Like it doesn't go nearly as deep as like the themes and ideas of Nier Automata, but it plays with like it's a very like superficial approach to like that kind of narrative. And yeah, it's, I mean, like, especially when you're like, we already suffer from action games where your protagonist is not a character so much as like a template for you to be a character. And that's just doubled when the character is a cat, because like, I don't know what my cat is thinking about in response to the things people are saying to him and all that stuff. Like there's no character to the cat. So, narrative wise, just, it didn't really work for me. But, I like, at the same point, like, it is a incredibly like especially parts of the game are incredibly beautiful. The cat is beautifully and wonderfully animated, and so like they clearly put so much time and effort and energy into making this like the most realistic video game cat ever. That like definitely like that deserves laudits and stuff like that. But yeah, there were just enough elements about the game that didn't click for me. So it keeps it. I think it's somewhere in my top 20, but it did not crack my top 10 here. Cam, any final thoughts you want to share on Stray before we move on?
No, because I'm trying to stay positive.
Sounds good. So my number 5, I don't know if it's going to be on anybody else's list, is Cult of the Lamb. Did anybody else check this out this year?
I did not.
Yeah, I didn't either.
This is what I was saying at the beginning of the show. We've had so many just random games that everybody like, you know, are on like only one person's list this year. So Cult of the Lamb, much like Bear and Breakfast that I spoke of earlier, is a city simulator kind of thing, but with such a fun dark twist to it. And especially like, you know, I went and I chose the path of naming all of my little cultists after like IRL friends, and so I would have, and then they come and like, you know, ask different requests of you and stuff like that. And I remember tweeting out to our friend Kyle Stevenson over at 61 Indie, basically that our friend Joey Noel from Kind of Funny had told me to sacrifice him, and I was like, sorry, Kyle. I needed the like points from her, so I went ahead and murdered you. But it's okay. I used the ritual to resurrect you, so you were just a zombie in my cult from then on, kind of thing.
Tell Frank what happened with me and him.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Tell him what happened with me and him, Trevor.
That's right.
Huh?
I did forget about that. Frank, I resisted the first time, but I did ultimately do it when you asked a second time. You told me to have Cameron eat a bowl of poop, and I
persuasive.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't do it the first time. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But then I ultimately did, and yeah, bowl of poop, pretty much an instant kill for a cultist. So so I had to bring Cameron back too. But yes, it's definitely like just and there were times where like Cameron would get like mad at me. I don't know why, but I had to throw him in the stocks for a little while and let him cool down. And yeah, just so much fun. The game did have like some bugs and issues at launch, which was a little bit of like ultimately I think it's gotten a lot, you know, it's gotten a lot of patches and it's gotten a lot of cleanup work in the time since. But at the end of the day, I also don't think it would have gone up above any of my top 4, even if it had been like working flaws at launch. But it was still a very fun game, and just the wild kinds of stories that you play. I mean, it is Animal Crossing, but the most dark twisted version, and you can just like have all of these characters be your friends and stuff. Like Frank, you and Jazz, because of like things I equipped you with, lived to be like over 100 years in the game. Like you were easily my longest living characters, because like even if I didn't, you know, go out of my way to kill people do just die of old age in that game. And again, you can use like rituals and fun little things to like bring them back or do other stuff with them. But yeah, you guys just were in it for the long haul, and so yeah, you're out there like very slowly moving around at times, but yeah, it was a lot of fun, just making your own little weird stories in this game. And then there's also like a fun roguelike hack and slash nature to it as well, that you're going through, and you're kind of going through these 4 different areas to like take out basically a boss in kind of each area. And yeah, it was a fun little mashup of these very like seemingly disparate ideas, but yeah, just a wild kind of fun time. So shout out to Cult of the Lamb as my number 5. Highly recommend anybody checking that out. All right. Let's move into number 4, and you can get me back if you hop into it and play it, Cameron. You can
Nobody's even
absolutely.
going to need to even ask me. You're just eating nothing but poop, Trevor.
It's fair.
You and Frank both.
Fair. Uh, Punish Frank for a thing that a character with his name did that he had no control over. I appreciate that. All right, Cameron, hit me with your number 4 as we round the. Well, I guess we're editing part of this out, but like the 2 hour mark on the podcast.
All right, my number 4 is this is definitely gonna be up higher for you guys. God of War Ragnarok.
All right, it is indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like ultimately knowing. I mean, like we said, like I know Vampire Survivors really high on your list, so not terribly surprised. But yeah, okay. Cool. Frank, hit me with your number 4.
Yeah, so my number 4 is going to be The Quarry.
The Quarry. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think you checked that out, right, Cameron? All right. So tell us about The Quarry.
Yeah, so this is a game I really liked, and I knew it was definitely going to be on my game of the year once I played it. But the more I like replayed it, trying to go for the platinum, which going back to again the dishonorable mentions, this game does not have a good platinum, and I gave up on it. But just for my initial playthrough, and then kind of a second playthrough where I wanted to fix like one or two things I had kind of gotten wrong and get some more trophies, like I had a lot of fun kind of initially. There's a lot of interesting trying to even think of the way to put it because I don't want to like spoil too much too. But I love the like campground vibes of them, everybody kind of being that at the end of summer, like all the camp counselors and all of these like kind of like weird kind of like other characters and people you interact with like this like weird kind of like family that's like featured in the game. But then it kind of like goes into a lot of the same direction that a lot of the supermassive games do, where I was like, man, you guys retread a lot of the same like territory. And I got that a lot because after I played this or around the same time, or good it was before or after, I watched some live streams of some of the Dark Picture games that someone I follow was playing. And I was just watching all of those and how many times I played Until Dawn and then playing this multiple times. I was like, yeah, they really retread a lot of the same like ideas and territory. But the Quarry does do some new things in terms of like the gameplay that I thought kept it a little bit more interesting and exciting than things have been in the past. And then the Quarry also feels like a way bigger budget title than all these like Dark Picture games, and it definitely feels like more of an Until Dawn. I think ultimately I like Until Dawn more with like the story and the characters in that, and I kind of makes me wonder if they'll ever even kind of beat that or kind of get close to that again. But the Quarry does get really close with like a ton of these like there's a lot of characters in it, and there's a lot of like celebrity kind of like characters that are fun to see in the Quarry, from like Brenda Song, and then like oh man, I forget the dude. Ethan Suplee's in it, is like one of the bad guys, but there's also just a bunch of other like cool characters in there. And the graphics in like the mocap on the characters are like amazing, and like Brenda Song looks incredible. It is like super like realistic and lifelike, and like some of the characters are really like really well done and detailed. But then like the game I think kind of breaks down into certain areas with like the story and some of the like one of the it has some of those traps of like you make one wrong decision and the person just dies immediately. And it's like, man, I had a guy die in the last chapter because one choice. Like it was like, do you want to go here or stay here? And I was like, go here, died immediately. And I just like and replaying the game and having it just be like, oh yeah, well that was the one choice I need to like do different, or like this other puzzle that I messed up before that I need to do different. Like it's just like small stuff like that, and then also having to the seeing kind of like the way the story changes, like you can see how minimal certain things are of like, oh, this is always going to happen, or like, oh, and then seeing so many alternate paths. It was like at first I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of alternate cutscenes and ways that even this, if you get the same scene, the people in it are different, or they're dressed different, or it plays out differently because of like choices you make going into it. But when you do that multiple times trying to go for like trophies, it gets like really old, and it kind of left me with more of a bad taste than I had after like my first one or two playthroughs, especially because some of the trophies are really weird and finicky, like not like missing a shot the entire game, because there's multiple points where it gives you control of like a gun and lets you aim at characters or like beer bottles or even anything, and like trying not to miss a shot throughout the whole game. I almost did it on my first playthrough, but I missed one at like near the end, and then trying to purposefully do it ended up being really hard for like whatever reason now that I was like focusing on it. But so yeah, like it has like not a great trophy list, and then trying to go for those trophies kind of like left me with more of a bad taste. But other than that, it's like a fun summer horror movie, kind of game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously those games are not not my cup of tea, but like knowing the general vibe of them, it is like, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that you are kind of realizing how much of the same territory they're treading, because they are, so much of them is just like playing off of like horror tropes. And I know I've seen, the in multiple games I've seen the, like, basically the Saw mechanic of, all right, you got to choose who dies, and it's, this person to this person, and you make the choice, from Until Dawn. I'm pretty sure I've seen that same kind of like choice in The Quarry, as well as probably at least one or two of the Dark Anthology games. So doesn't surprise me, but it's, I mean, they became tropes for a reason. So I think the thought is like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And because it is putting the choice in your hands as the player, it does, obviously add a little bit to the immersion vibes. And yeah, it definitely felt like The Quarry had like the time and energy needed to, make it a more polished product compared to the Dark Anthology stuff that they kind of seemingly, crank out a little bit every now and then. But Cameron, was this anywhere on your radar? Anything you're gonna look into at any point?
I was hoping we'd play it together at some point. Like, it seems like a fun like couch co-op game of like trading the controller back and forth type thing. I know that's how I like to play Until Dawn. With like I went to a Halloween party that literally was just like everybody passing around the controller while playing Until Dawn, just like back and forth. And so it's something I wouldn't mind doing with you. I
don't know if I'll be able to commit to that. We very specifically, when we went and did, we played Until Dawn as part of like our launch stream. I very much was like, I'll get the game. I'll have it on the system. I'm not touching the controls for it. So it was very much like letting Jazz kind of drive, or yeah, I think it was pretty much Jazz driving the whole time, or maybe Jazz and Logan and Frank. But it was very much like, I'm going to be largely watching this game through like closed, eyes, or looking down, kind of monitoring the chat or whatever, so I'm not having to like focus on the game, because I don't like horror. I don't like these games very specifically lean into jump scares and stuff, which is just not my jam, not my cup of tea. So I don't think I will be joining you for the Quarry let's play anytime ever. But you can try and wear me down. We'll see.
Maybe we'll make it part of a bet.
Nah, I'm not gonna succumb to that. Any final thoughts, Frank, before we move on?
Yeah, because kind of going off what you were saying there too, like the Quarry does get like gory. And like there are some scenes, especially like I said, I had to see a bunch of different variations, and sometimes it is like, whoa, wow, like it gives you the option to shoot someone, and then you do it, and you get like a horrific scene of their face like exploding, and then like it's all like animated really well, and like I think they do that really well. And I think some of the horror stuff is done really well, even if it gets like tropey or kind of weird. And like I said, like it wasn't really scary for me at many points, but it does do a lot with that. It's just a thing I want to see them get away from and tell like other horror stories or do other horror things, because it always comes down to some like bipedal monster. And I'm like, that's why even with the Dark Picture games, I was like, wow, we're really doing this again? Like, it always comes down to like some of their same kind of ideas that they like fall back on. And I would love to see them do just kind of more different and interesting things. But as someone who, from what I've seen of them, I don't really love the Dark Pictures games, but I really like Until Dawn. So I'm happy that this was more of like an Until Dawn kind of thing. That's like a little bit bigger budget and told like a better story, at least.
Very cool. All right. My number 4, I'm pretty sure isn't on any of your guys' lists, was Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga.
Not mine.
This is the one game that Logan would have like chipped in on, so it is like it would have had a better chance on the overall game of the year list if I had his points to this one, but so be it. This as a longtime fan of the Lego games, this was like, I remember when they did Lego The Force Awakens, I was like, oh, that sucks. You guys are getting to this point where you're just making a game about a single movie. They made like the Lego Hobbit that was going to be the whole trilogy, and then they stopped making it, so they never even made the third movie because it just didn't sell well enough and stuff like that. So So this that had like the like from the ground up redesign stuff like that. Like it admittedly had a lot of stories coming out about like crunch and stuff like that, and that absolutely sucks. And I hope that the team is healthy and in a better place now that the game is out and sold like gangbusters and did so well. But it is so much the Lego game charm for all 9 movies. And then like the DLC even like started throwing characters from like the Mandalorian or even Andor and stuff like that. It doesn't really add new stuff for you to do, but you can run around as Cassian Andor if you want, and have some fun with that. But yeah, it's just like it was like I always 100% these games anyway if I hop into them, and doing so in this one was certainly a beast because there is so much into this game, like hundreds and hundreds, like probably almost like 1,000, over 1,000 bricks, I'm pretty sure. That you are like collecting across the different levels, across the different worlds, and like a million side quests and stuff to do across the different planets. But yeah, so much fun. A lot of the quests are just goofy little fun things. There are obviously a lot of fetch quests and stuff like that. It is, a fairly simple game, but the love and care and the fandom behind it, like the myriad of different characters you can find from the Star Wars universe are certainly bountiful, and I had a very, very fun time with it. It was a lot of fun hopping into. I know, again, like Logan and I talked about this game a lot early in the year, especially like anytime we were recording that Bond show, we'd kind of have like an update on like where each of us was. Logan going far slower through that game than I did, but yeah, ultimately it was really the only one he felt he would have had anything to add to the conversation this year. So, but yeah, that is the Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga. And I would very much love, and I think I heard rumors that they're looking at doing like DLC for it that will be like, all right, we're gonna do like the Mandalorian season 1 or something like that, and kind of like throw in extra little missions to play into some of the more extended stuff. So do a Clone Wars level or a Rebels level or Andor. I mean, especially Andor would be like really fun to see like what little tweaks and stuff and takes they have on that. But we'll see if they do any more of that. Moving on to our number 3s. Cameron, hit me with your number 3 game of the year.
It's a game you brought up just a little bit ago. It's called Vampire Survivor.
All right. I'm guessing that's not higher on your list there, Frank?
No, I haven't played this one. I've seen a lot about it, and I know people really love it. It just seems so weird to me. But I think you were kind of right about it being like the perfect endorphin game, it seems like,
Yeah. All right, Cameron, take us away. Gush about Vampire Survivors.
I'm
actually surprised it's number 3 on your list.
Yep. This was a fight. This was a fight on the top 3 of my list. It was a knockout, drag out fight. Like, it was such a hard choice to make on it, but I will say that Vampire Survivors is without a doubt one of the best games I've ever played, much less like being in the top 10 of my list of this year. Depending on the time of last year, these 3 games could have been in any location on this. I'm sure about where I have them now, but I will say Vampire Survivors is a endorphin given game. You move around, things happen, lights go off, points go up, the numbers go up.
Yeah, the numbers go up.
The numbers go up.
Huge.
The numbers go up. And like you got to move around.
And the numbers of everything, the numbers of enemies, the numbers of damage you're doing, all the numbers go up.
All numbers go up. All the numbers go up. It's like it's the perfect
the clock is going up.
Mm-hmm. It's not a countdown, it's a count up to 30 minutes.
I could be wrong, but I think I heard the developers behind this game used to make like casino gambling games.
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah.
They definitely brought that addictive nature here. Because Trevor knows, because I told him, I'm like, yeah, sometimes during the podcast when you were like really going on about something, I would just play some Vampire Survivors.
Yep. That was the thing that happened. You just had it like going on the other screen. I'm like, are you what? Like I threw to you, Cam. He's like, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
It just like to a point where like I legitimately like if I have like something I need to do or I have like an engagement or I need to leave in like an hour. That's not one game that I can be like, oh well, let me just put in one game of this. Doesn't happen. It doesn't stay to just one game. It will always go for more than one game. I can't stop. I've fought this entire podcast not to pull it up and play it. It is a constant battle for me to do anything else in my life besides play Vampire Survivors. Flat out, like that, like breathing, eating, and drinking, like at certain times were on lower priorities than Vampire Survivors. It's truly like such a great game as far as like gameplay, but it has like no story. Like I don't even know if I've ever fought a vampire in that game.
You survived.
I've found all of the coffins in all of the levels, and it's always like, we're sorry, your vampire's in another coffin. I'm like, all right, is there actually a vampire in this game,
I don't
or
know.
is it all a trick?
I don't know. All I know, like, dude, I've found a demon with wings that he uses a guitar for his weapon. Haven't met a vampire yet. Oh, it's the wildest game, man. It's the wildest game. It's great. It's so fantastic. I told Trevor at some point after like I finished playing a bunch of other games, I'm gonna go play the DLC. Gosh, it's so good. But it's a gameplay ass game. Period. Full out. There's nothing else about it. It's so good. Even if it costs you money, pick it up. It's only a couple bucks. It's
at most it's like $5 on the most expensive console, I think. But
Yeah.
it's on Game Pass. It's like $4 on Steam or something, or and you can usually find it on sale or something. Yeah, it's a very cheap game for the amount of like love that people have poured into this game. It's a very low barrier to entry.
Yep. It's so good. Anybody can play it. It's just pretty it's pretty damn fantastic. But yeah, it's my number 3 game of the year. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add, since it was my number 9, it was one of those games I checked out in like that last week because you'd been gushing about it and I'd seen a lot of other people loving it. So I was like, all right, especially it's on Game Pass, I'll check it out. I had also earlier bought it on Steam already. So if I really wanted to, and I'm glad I didn't because I would have a lot of the same issues you've had, Cameron. I could boot it up on my Steam Deck there at the end of the night. Instead, I booted it up on my Xbox at the end of the night, and then sleep was not a priority for me. So yeah, I was like, there were multiple nights where I was like up until 4 a.m. and I'm like, I'm so glad I don't start work until 11, so I can at least get a few hours of sleep, because it absolutely hits that like one more run kind of vibe. And especially as all of those numbers go up and as you start learning like the combinations and stuff, and you can start kind of like optimizing your builds for whatever you need to do and all that stuff, there does become like this fun strategy to the game. And there's so much chaos by the end game, regardless of like, you know, you could still get to 29:59 of your trying to get to 30 minutes, and just one wrong move or run wrong thing will, like, you'll be overwhelmed and swamped and stuff like that. But it's still wildly entertaining and fun, and especially for like such a simple mechanic kind of thing. It is really just you're basically moving your character and choosing, like, you know, what upgrades you get and stuff as you go throughout the game. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it very much, as I said earlier, it was very much a game I had to basically stop booting up because otherwise it was going to be a problem. So yeah, bad addictive casino people making a very good game.
I will say, thank God I lost my job so I couldn't actually end up buying that Steam Deck.
Yeah, there you go. Anything to add on your end, Frank? Is this a game that you're interested in checking out?
Probably not. Like, it definitely sounds very fun and addictive, but just the gameplay I've seen of it just like didn't seem super appealing to me, or like anything I want to necessarily jump into.
Frank, just give it a shot. That's all I'm gonna say. Actually, you know what? Maybe don't give it a shot. Keep your life pure.
Yeah.
Vampire Survivors is literally video game crack cocaine. You will never get off of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm surprised because it is now on mobile and it's free on mobile. And like, if you die, I think it's like you watch an ad and you can get revived or something like that.
Not even Vampire Survivors can get me to watch a mobile ad. Okay.
All right. Well, that's Vampire Survivors. Frank, hit me with your number 3 game of the year.
Yeah, so these next 3 I'm excited about because these are definitely like obviously my big favorites of the year. But number 3 for me is Sifu.
I wondered if you got around to Sifu.
Yeah.
Did you end up checking out Sifu, Cameron?
I did not.
Yeah, it's not on my list anywhere. So tell us, Frank, Sifu.
Yeah, I mean, this game's incredible. I really loved it. It is such a fun game. Like, obviously, I think one of the bigger things about it is the gameplay in this game is like is really good. It feels really good. It's also just all about getting down like that, kind of like a Souls game where it's all about getting down like timing and learning enemy like attack patterns, and then even learning like the stages because there's like shortcuts and fights like you don't even have to do. Because I definitely found myself like at one point, especially in like the club level, which is like the second or third level, find I found myself like that level's really long and there's a lot of fights you actually don't even need to do, but I was just doing anyways. And then I would be like not as young as I wanted to be because that's kind of how the health system works in Sifu's. Your age goes up when you die. And then by the time I would get to the boss, I'd be older than I wanted to be. And then he was like destroying me for a while. But you like learn it. And I learned like, okay, I can just walk through this room or I can like ignore these people or do this or go this pathway. That'll like save me a bunch of time. And then you eventually just kind of learn all the different bosses and their ticks and what you need to be doing. And like with that fight, I'm like, okay, you can't do it barehanded. You need like a weapon or like, and that really helps. And then it's like the design of all of the fights is so good where all of the enemies have like these interesting, unique attack patterns, especially like the bosses. And they all have like different phases where you end up transported to like this magical version of like whatever their kind of like arena is. And there's like a guy, the first guy you fight is the botanist, and he takes you to like a bamboo forest and he's like jumping in and out of the trees. And then he can also like summon trees behind you and hit you into them to like stagger you. Like a lot of the like it's this like kung fu heavy game and a lot of it is like accurate like kung fu moves and design. And the thing that impresses me a lot about it is the way that there's like hundreds of different animations for like you're fighting this guy, is he up against a wall, is there a guardrail there, are you going up the stairs, down the stairs, like are you in a hallway, like, and you'll do unique animations that use like whatever weapon you have and then plus whatever part of the environment you're in. And like it's so cool to use pieces of the world in like in the actual gameplay, even if it's just like visually during some of the like combos you can do. And the game just goes super deep into being this like really good comboed beat 'em up that's actually like really hard. And besides the fact that it plays well, I think I love the style of this game. It's like one of my favorite games all year just because of that. Like some of the levels I think are incredible and like really well designed. Especially this, my favorite level in that game is the fourth level, I think, which is the museum. And you're going through like fighting through like modern art exhibits. And there's one where the art exhibit is just like a kunai swinging on like a chain, and you can like use that to hit enemies with, and like you can just kind of avoid it. Like, and then there's like a moment where you're fighting dudes in a hallway and it goes like to a side scrolling kind of thing. And it feels like the Daredevil like hallway fight scene where you're just beating up like 40 guys in like a hallway. Like, there's so many just amazing moments and like set pieces. And then there's even like an interesting story that they're very like hands off about that you can kind of like, there's only a handful of cutscenes in the whole game and they're very light on voice acting. But you can actually put the whole story together by like getting all the collectibles, and actually they tell a lot of story through some of the collectibles you can find. And they do a cool thing where some of the collectibles you need to get other collectibles in other levels. So there's sometimes where you're kind of hopping between like level 4 and then level 2, and then like I had to get something out of a safe in one level and then bring it to a guy in the club who's like a computer hacker, and then he hacked it for me, and then I went back to the other level. Like there's some like couple cool stuff they do like that, but that's just like collectible stuff. But there's some interesting, cool things that they like are even telling in that.
Very nice. Yeah, I remember like really thinking the original like the trailer and stuff for this game was like super cool, and then like as basically like reviews hit and stuff and people were talking about it, like the difficulty of the game, I was like, oh no, that's the turnoff for me. And I know they eventually patched in like an easier mode to it, but I never circled back around to it. It's still on my radar of games I want to try and check out, maybe pick it up on a sale or something like that, or if it eventually comes to like PlayStation Plus or something, I definitely want to give it a look. But yeah, that was like the big like aversion to me, was hearing just like the difficult nature. And for me it is like, I mean, much like the Soulsborne type games and stuff like that, I get that the whole like idea of the game is learn the patterns and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't have the patience. I don't have the time to do that. Sometimes I'll stay up until 4 a.m. to learn the patterns of Vampire Survivor, but that's because it's throwing all these endorphins at me. But yeah, it's my I look at this point, really it is much more for that like instant gratification. And if I'm going to constantly be having the crap kicked out of me, getting older and older and older and eventually dying, and I didn't make it past level 2, that's not going to be a good time for me. So yeah, it's on my, like, it's still on my radar, especially since they kind of added in like more accessibility options and stuff like that, easier mode. But yeah, it did not make my playlist this year. How about you, Cam? Any interest or hopping into Sifu from you?
Yeah, I've had a lot of interest in Sifu. It's when it launched, it was just such a big ask for such a short game with where my expenses were at the time. And so I ended up missing out on it. But it's definitely a game that fits into like my criteria of like what I'm looking for in a game. So I am in the future looking forward to definitely in checking it out.
Cool. On my number 3, which Frank, you brought up earlier, is Tunic.
Nice.
So, and I know it's not on Cameron's list, so I'll say this similar to Sifu was a game I was not going to check out until like a little bit before launch. I heard people talking about, oh yeah, there are accessibility things you can kind of like turn down damage, or you can kind of create like an invincibility mode kind of thing. And so I went in and checked it out, so not having to be stressed about the combat and stuff like that, because I had played this game at PAX West like in 2017 or something like that, and the demo was brutal. And like part of it, talking to the dev at the time, like part of it was making the demo intentionally brutal so people weren't there for a long time playing the game and he could get more people through it. And so I was like, oh, that's a clever idea. But yeah, it was like that wasn't the kind of vibe I was going for or looking for. But the combination of, hey, yeah, there is like you can turn on some modifiers and stuff like that, and it's on Game Pass. I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna check this out. And it is one of those games. It will be like an honorary platinum because I got the 1,000 out of 1,000 achievement score on it, because I had so much fun playing through it, discovering the puzzles that the game has, the way those puzzles and the way playing that game felt like the way people describe Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild in terms of like discoverability. Like you find a page of this very Nintendo-esque, like original Nintendo Entertainment System-esque instruction manual that's in a completely random language, but they have a thing circled that gives you a hint on where you need to go next or how you need to do a thing or whatever you need to do. And it was so like cool the way that is introduced to you throughout or over the course of the game, the piecemeal nature of that, and how like it gives you the maps to certain places and how to get there. Like it was such an ingenious element of helping solve the puzzle, and then like finding the puzzles within the game that aren't really like outlined there, but you start learning like the language and the vocabulary of the game, and so you start realizing, oh, if there's this kind of line pattern, that probably means try like pushing the direction buttons in that pattern and see if a thing happens. And sure enough, like a door will open or something like that, and you've unlocked a secret. Like the cool like discoverability elements of that game were so much fun. It's very much on my like I'm waiting for it to hit a sale now. Now that it's on PlayStation, so I can pick it up and replay it and dive in and do the platinum run on that, because yeah, so much fun. And you're running around as a little fox Link, basically, a little fox with a sword and shield. So shout out to that. Frank, it was on your list. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you were saying. Like, I really love the art style. Like, it reminds me a lot of that like Link's Awakening remake they did, or it kind of looks like a diorama kind of style thing. And so yeah, I really love how it looked. One of my favorite things is that discoverability. Like the game is super hands off with like telling you things like what to do or where to go, and you can kind of just explore. And I hear a lot of people talk about like the manual part of it there, where like they kind of giving you these new pages and you're kind of unlocking and learning things. But I even liked just like wandering through the world and finding things. And like there was a moment I had that like I had went through to like the west side of the map, and I kind of ended up in this like cave system type thing. And then there was kind of a split, and I was like, okay, I can go this way or I can go this way. Well, let me go this way. And it kind of backtracked me up and then like through some hallways and then like up a staircase that came out behind of a building. And because of the way the game, like the camera angle is displayed, I never would have thought to like rotate it around the building and find a staircase there. But now I'm like, oh, now there's the staircase here. I can just cut down here and go through the hallways, and I don't have to go through this whole path and fight all these enemies and do whatever. And like, it's just a fun thing to just like find all these small things, even like that I think you're constantly just discovering all this like fun new elements and like exciting things. It reminds me of a lot of like obviously like the Zelda games, you know, and especially even like A Link to the Past or like Link's Awakening. And the biggest drawback for me about it that kind of holds it far back for me is I don't love the combat a lot of the time. Like, and they did put those accessibility modes in, and I've ended up turning them on at one point, and it's just like because it's just like, man, I don't want to like deal with some of the combat when they ask you to do like some of them in like more intense moments. Because a lot of times it feels like kind of slow to me, where it feels like, especially early in the game, where it's like I'll attack and then they're going to attack me, and then I'm going to attack and then they're going to attack me, and it's just that, and it's like comparison I heard a lot of people make that I agree with is like I wish I played more like Death's Door, where like Death's Door I checked that out on Game Pass earlier this year and I played it for like an hour and that kind of fell out, but it feels so much better and so much faster where you're like attack and then like dodge rolling, and it's really fast and it feels just a lot better and more interesting, and how I kind of wish Tunic felt, because if Tunic played like that I would think it would be a better game for me personally.
Absolutely, absolutely fair. And yeah, the like the discoverability of like those shortcuts and stuff again is like so like that's people finding the ladders and Soulsborns and stuff like that. That like okay now you don't need to go this whole long circuitous path. You can avoid all of that because now you know that a thing is here, or now you've unlocked this path, or this you've dropped down this ladder or something like that. So yeah, lots of fun in a very fun like chibi-esque kind of art style, and yeah, lots of fun. And then there's also like it's not the thing I think of with the game, but like the story's also an interesting story that is also very obliquely told, in part through the instruction manual and then in part through this language that you don't really understand because none of it is being translated or anything like that. So you're just kind of getting like a visual story told to you, where language is like the language means something to, and like the developers kind of come out and been like, no, everything means a thing. But like none of us can necessarily translate. You can probably translate words here and there based off of like what's in the manual, but yeah, you're not going to get like a word perfect translation probably of that game, but still lots of fun. So shout out to Tunic. All right. We are in our top twos here. So let us go. Cameron, hit me with your number 2 game of the year.
My number 2 game of the year is Citizen Sleeper.
All right.
Citizen Sleeper is one of the best games I've ever played. Beyond that, it's one of the best experiences I've ever had in anything, any medium. Citizen Sleeper is a game that I think has done a lot to... Let me back up a little bit and say this. There are very few games where I've played that game and it's like, man, I want to live in that. There are very few games that the world is as horrible or terrible as like the conditions of the world of Citizen Sleeper that I think that same thing. I felt like I was part of that world, and that level of immersion is very difficult to make, and it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to experience. But I think that Citizen Sleeper nailed that for me, at least. On a gameplay aspect, it's super indie, super simple. No voice acting, very, very straightforward as far as its presentation goes. It's dialogue and everything you do in that on that level of things with inter-character like relationships is all done from a very like visual novel style storytelling, where you're seeing the character model of the other person, and that is how you're interacting with them. Not necessarily like a first person sort of view, but definitely that sort of like visual novel style. The actual gameplay is done based off of, you get like a set of dice. But essentially if you thought about it as a board game, you roll X number of dice at the beginning of your day. Those are your numbers, and high numbers aren't necessarily better than low numbers, and vice versa. Some things take specific numbers to be able to do, a 2 or a 4. And it's not necessarily like it will always take that. Sometimes things are just different. And a lot of times you have a lot of variety of options for the different numbers that could fit into that. But there's sometimes where it's like, okay, I really want this thing to succeed, so I'll use a 6 because this will give me a really high outcome for this one on the odds. But I already used all my 6s, or I used all my high numbers, so all I have left is this one that's basically you have a 50% chance of a bad outcome. And you have to decide, okay, am I going to risk it or am I going to do this? Like, it creates these really great moments of tension. It's not tense, but there is tension to the story that it's telling. And the story it's telling is incredibly impactful. It's one of that brings up questions about, what does it mean to be human? Okay, but then what are the extensions of human rights? What are the extensions of human rights in a corporate owned society? There's something that really much it does a really great job of speaking to on a lot of deep levels in regards to kind of like where I think we're currently at in our modern society. And it kind of paints a very nihilistic picture. But what that game does is it forces you and puts you in a situation where you can either it doesn't force you, but it puts you in a situation where you can give up or you can have hope and you can work for just that one more day. You work towards trying to get to that next step. And there are some good days, there are some bad days. There are troubles that come up that like it costs you money or resources and you have to try to resolve them. You meet characters who are in hard places, who are right there with you. There's a particular storyline in that game that broke my heart. In the best possible way. This game is so fantastic. I don't want to spoil anything, but the thing that kept me off is I don't want to have some weaknesses on my starting character because you can choose between three models of what you are. And I was like, but I don't want to have like a serious weakness. I like to have like minor weaknesses. If that was my fear of jumping into it, I jumped into it anyway after hearing some people rave about it. It is so worth your time. It is so worth your energy, and it is so worth your heart being invested in it because it's a game that pays you back for the investment that you made, that you make in it on every level. So it's my number 2 game.
Very cool. Yeah, I know. Like, it was one of those, as we, a couple weeks ago when we were talking about, top 10, you were very like coy with, you're never going to guess these games. It doesn't surprise me given like we haven't talked about it like recently or something like that, but like I knew that this game had an impact for you. And so it doesn't surprise me that it is so high up on your list. And I'm glad you found a game like that really hit for you. Some of the way you're describing it, I don't know if how similar it is, but it was giving me like Disco Elysium flashbacks, which isn't necessarily like having tried to hop into that game a couple times now. I'm like, there are just things of that game that don't click for me. And so I don't know if Citizen Sleeper would be the same kind of thing, but it's like knowing that it reached this high up on your list. I'll circle back while we've got some lighter time, maybe this year and here at the beginning of this year, especially you and I have talked like there isn't really a ton until like Jedi Survivor in March that is like really calling to me. So maybe I'll hop in and give Citizen Sleeper some thoughts and some time after playing through P3 Portable that I'm doing right now, and give it a thought.
I will say if your note or your concern is that it's a lot like Disco Elysium, it's a very different style of storytelling. And like Disco Elysium is its own beast that we do not have time to get into right now, but it is definitely like a different kind of story than that. Although I can see the colors that Disco Elysium paints with are a lot of the same colors that Citizen Sleeper paints with, but the way that it paints and what it paints out of them are extremely different. Use that as a metaphor. So I would say definitely hop in.
Cool. Sounds good. Frank, anything from you on that, or you want to go to your number 2?
It sounds like a cool game. Another friend of mine was super into it earlier this year because I believe that is also on Game Pass. And so, another fun Game Pass game for you out there.
Excellent. No harm, no foul. Then, hit us with your number two. I'm pretty sure I know what your number one and number two are. I need you to confirm what the ranking of those two are, Frank, and then I can start tallying up because I already have all my stuff in and I know what number one is going to be. So hit me with your number two, Frank.
Yeah, my number two is going to be Road 96.
I was spot on. Excellent. So yes, this came up in Cameron's honorable mentions. When you were able to finally return after a long kind of time away, you told us a lot about and you gushed about Road 96. But for anybody who didn't catch that episode, tell us why Road 96 is your number two game of the year.
Yeah, Road 96 is definitely one of the best games I played this year, where it was very surprising and it's very unique and interesting. And I think that a lot of the trailers don't even do it justice because it looked interesting at like whatever award or like just kind of show it was shown at and announced at, but it ends up being this like really interesting, almost like roguelite-ish narrative game where, kind of like Cam was saying, one of the things he didn't like about it is like when you run through as like a character and you kind of pick them like Rogue Legacy, where it'll give you like 3 cards that are like different characters with like mildly different stats of like how much stamina they have, how long they've been on the road, like how far away from the border they are, and then like how much money they have and stuff like that. And you kind of pick them and go through a journey as them. And as you're kind of going through the world with all these individual characters, you're kind of creating like an overall story with like characters in the world that I really enjoyed. So I really enjoyed a lot of those smaller like segments you get with some of the characters they have. And then the way you kind of like interact with the same character via like 6 or 7 different people, but you're kind of continuing that one story, even though you're like new people every time you interact with like one of the main characters of like the game. It's a super interesting and unique thing, and there's so many different scenes you can get based on like the things you do, and like some of them are small and some of them are bigger. And I was always just so interested in like what was happening and what was going to happen. And some of the character runs I had through, like some of the people just totally ended up getting killed or like arrested or like crazy stuff. And then some people I made it across the border multiple times with, and it was awesome. And like sometimes you just get better RNG than others. But I thought the story was very unique and interesting, and the way, like I said, the way they tell it through, like you're playing all these new characters, meeting these new people, the same people over and over and over again, but then they like reference things that have already kind of happened between like you and them, even though they're like talking about like, oh, I met this other person like a couple days ago and we did this or whatever, or, like they helped me escape from the police and like do whatever, like I really liked a lot of it, and I feel like it's a hard game to talk about or sell just because it is kind of like weird and interesting, and I feel like a lot of it doesn't make sense until you kind of get behind the wheel of it and be like, oh, this is what this game is.
Yeah, I will say that is definitely the case. I didn't want to say too much of it in my honorable mentions, not just because it was one of your top 10, but also because it is that hard of a game to sell without spoiling everything. Yeah. The thing about it, that roguelike, I could handle me being somebody different each run. That was fine. The problem I had is that the connections that I made with those people, like I felt differently about those characters than somebody who would just meet them would feel like. Mm-hmm. And so I never felt like it was a good like it's cool. I love the characters in that game, but their interactions with me sometimes felt odd because it's like you're this deep into your own story, but I'm just a fresh face coming into it. And it doesn't make sense that like the game is the way that the game and tone and setting is taking is it's like you have met them before because you have as a player, but there is that element of like I'm feeling like a disconnect, and that's really what dropped it down for me. But I think everything you said is absolutely true. It's on Game Pass. People should check out this game. It's really, really good.
Yeah, after we discussed it, I don't think I had ever uninstalled it from because I had like installed it on Game Pass, way back when, and I just didn't circle around to checking it out after you were gushing about it. But it's another one I'll throw, similar to Citizen Sleeper, in the like queue of like I should really sit down and check this out because it definitely sounds interesting. At the same time, I see like where your frustrations come from, Cam, in terms of like that roguelike of like, oh, you got invested in a character, but suddenly you make a wrong choice and boom, that character is gone, and you don't get a chance to like, well, let me retry let me start this chapter or something like that. Nope, moving on to the next beat of the story. Which, yeah, is if you're emotionally invested in a character, that's not a fun end to that story or that moment. Yeah, it's definitely one that I'll have to give a thought to, and I'm glad to see how high it ended up making on your list, Frank. It's really cool to see kind of a seemingly smaller game kind of make the rounds like that. Cool. My number two, as I think Cameron had earlier as well, Horizon Forbidden West. Horizon Forbidden West was or Horizon Zero Dawn rather, was my game of the year back in 2017. So I was very excited to get Forbidden West beginning of this year, and for a good chunk of the year, it was my game of the year because it was like it did everything I want out of a sequel like this, of like it learned the lessons of the first game. It continued to evolve like the great ideas of the first game, and gave us like new flavors of things. I think some of the best elements of like going into this game, I remember having a conversation with either Cameron or Logan about how like I didn't remember the story of Horizon Zero Dawn all that much. Like I remember like the big beats, I remember like the big twists and stuff like that, but I didn't remember like the moment to moment. And there was a lot before Forbidden West came out where I was like replaying Zero Dawn a little bit, and there were like just characters I'd completely forgotten about. I was glad I hopped in because like seeing those characters come back in this one, like Varl and Erend, and being so much more part of Aloy's story in this one. I think one of the best choices that they made in this one is giving Aloy a home base that you come back to over the course of the game, and giving her like a squad. So it's almost like a Mass Effect kind of vibe of the Normandy, and going back and getting to like talk to these characters and kind of hearing what they've been up to while you've been out fighting robot dinosaurs and stuff like that. And it made her so much more of a likable protagonist and character compared to the first game. I was never one that like didn't like Aloy. I think Ashley Birch has a great performance, but I think I think Logan, one of Logan's big criticisms was like she's just always angry and like she's so distrustful of everything. I'm like, yeah, that's established at the beginning that she was like, she has a right to be angry at everybody. She was an outcast. She grew up as an outcast. The world didn't want her, so she's going to be mistrustful towards everybody. I totally get that. I like that consistency, and it makes sense to me. But because she gets like a squad to kind of come along with her in this one, it made it so much more like she is a much more, I think, personable one because she has people to bounce off with for good sections of this game. And there were a lot of incredible story beats that I really liked about this game as well. I like, without getting into spoilers, like the Poseidon quest line is one of those like things I will always remember about this game, and the incredibly stunning visuals and the way that takes things about our world and kind of like twists them into the Horizon world was so much fun. There's even within that quest line, there's like an Ish's story-esque kind of thing, a la The Last of Us Part 1, that is a lot of fun to like discover and find, and so yeah, it like, I think they did a much better job of making this a memorable story, making memorable characters in it. I can't wait for the DLC that's going to come out in, I think, April, where they're going up to Hollywood. I think that's going to be a lot of fun to explore, like getting to go to the like San Francisco, going more to the West Coast in this one was just a lot of fun. And yeah, it continued being a giant open world Metroidvania-esque game, but it gave such just a more fun cast of character. I love Katalo's a character who gets introduced in this one and is immediately like one of my favorites. And like thinking back to, there were like one or two characters that popped up in this one, and I was like, oh, that's right, I did like you from the first game. And they only pop up in this one for a little bit, and I was like, oh, I wish there a couple more characters had like made the journey into this one, but it was still a ton of fun. I had such a great time with it. So shout out to Horizon Forbidden West. Cam, it was on your list too. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I hope people who say it's like the criticism about Aloy being like, oh, she's always angry. And you are 100% right. It is within her character's arc to be distrustful and angry at people. It's part of her backstory and it's part of her character growth as she learns to overcome that. She starts to in Zero Dawn and she continues that throughout this game. In Forbidden West. There's a lot of characters that people praise for that character arc and for how long they stay in the angry side of that character arc. And I'm just going to say people should examine where those feelings are coming from, because a lot of times when I hear people say, oh, they're just angry, and it's like, but you like it when it's somebody, a different kind of character with a different trait than Aloy has.
Yeah, you didn't mind when it was Marcus Phoenix.
Yeah, you didn't mind. Like, there's a lot of male characters that are like iconic male video game characters where their personification is they're angry and distrustful of people, and you're loving that. But as soon as, like, I'm not saying you don't like that. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I am saying just examine that, because that's a serious thing that you should examine, because it's healthy to examine those things and where those feelings come from and to know whether or not, like, it's certified or justified. But we do live in a patriarchy, people, so pay attention to those things. Yeah, that being said, this game fucking rules. I love this game. This game was so much fun. I will put it out there. If you're looking to have a banger, like, scenario, you're looking to have, like, the best kind of atmosphere, I'm just saying the Mojave Desert does not disappoint. The Mojave portions of this game, whether it's the Arizona, the Nevada, any of those portions, Mojave is, like, so good. Like, their interpretation of the, like, of the like, the whole Grand Canyon or not Grand Canyon, but the whole Mojave aspect of it, leading up to when you start getting further out west, is chef's kiss perfect. I love that. I love the Las Vegas. Did you say Las Vegas, or did I spoil that?
No, I specifically said the Poseidon stuff, but like, it's A, it's been out long enough, and B, if you know you're going to San Francisco, yeah, it's probably fine that, that you know Las Vegas is going to be there.
The Poseidon quest line is the absolute banger. And to see also, like, when you're getting into the lore of everything, the lore behind the culture, the largest culture that you end up interacting with throughout the game, their backstory within, like, our world is like, it like starts off like, oh, I don't know how I feel about it, and then they all turn out to be awesome, so it's cool. The beginning is like, end game, awesome as hell. Like, the more you find out about them, the more you find out about like, where their inspiration's coming from. That inspiration has, like, some sketchy starts that feels a little militia-y, and then, but it ends up getting to, like, a really, really cool place. And it's really inspirational, and to see them, and to see this civilization, and, like, this tribal atmosphere pop up in a way that's, like, united, but also suffering from conflict, and the power struggles and the politics are way more prevalent in this game, and are really awesome to see and encounter. The sci-fi aspects of it, little rougher, for me, especially because the way that this game ends, I think, has, like, a very, like, it like, there's a lot that can be said about it. There's a lot that Trevor and I have talked about it. And I know that a lot of other people in their Game of the Years, when they're talking about the ending of this game, have that same criticism for it. That does impact where I land on this game overall. But I do think that Aloy is a fantastic character. I loved seeing her grow in this game. I love the characters that she gets to interact with. Like, absolutely, like, her finally having, like, a female friend and, like, trying to figure out that dynamic was a lot of fun to see her character develop with that, as well as just, like, the people around her opening up to her felt very natural for her to start opening up to them, and her actually starting to talk about, like, in Zero Dawn, her tragedy and traumas are very recent. Her coming and talking about them in this game makes you feel impactful. The little items that, like, it's a classic video game trope. You walk around a room and you're like, and it's the character reflects on the item that's in the room. The way she does that with some of the characters is really impactful, and I think is just excellently executed. This would have been way higher up on my list if this year was had any less of just, like, these absolute incredible games coming out. Or this past year, the games came out. were any less incredible than they were, this would have been so much higher up on my list. That being said, it does hit a certain level of just like Gorilla does such an amazing job with this game. I can't give it enough praise. It's so good.
Yeah, so much fun. And one of the other elements I want to really praise is, in addition to like the world design, like the NPCs, because you're going to get a ton of quests from a ton of NPCs and stuff like that, and the way like the design across them, easily like a super crazy diverse cast of characters, but like they also all have their own like unique looks and feels, and a lot of characters will give you a quest and then like you'll progress through the game and you'll find that character in a new place and they'll give you another quest, and immediately like remembering who those characters were over the course of, you know, a 50-hour experience, the fact that I was able to like just immediately and instinctually like be like, oh, that's right, I helped you with this before, was, I think, really, really well done and really, really cool. So, yeah, shout out to that as well. And it's made the rounds multiple times, but like, you know, the hairstyles of like black characters, especially in that game, in when we had like so many other games that like character creators had nothing for, you know, any non-white character kind of thing. It was like, Horizon knew the assignment and nailed it, and did a great job with it. So yeah, shout out to Horizon Forbidden West. Again, can't wait to it. Like the Call of the Wild VR is like the thing that is almost making me want to actually drop way too much money for a PSVR 2. But I'm not there yet, and I don't know if I don't know if I'll pull the trigger on it. But I am sad that I won't get to experience that until if that happens or whatever. But we will have the DLC later this year. So shout out to Horizon. Was it anywhere on your radar to check out Horizon, Frank?
Not really. It's one I still might get around to, because there was definitely a couple times I considered it and even like hovered over the icon on like PSN and almost bought it. But I didn't really love the first one. And besides the fact that this one I think was kind of like good for all the reasons you said, if you weren't a fan of the first one, this is just kind of a lot more of the same, even if it's better. So in like my problems aren't even with Aloy. I just didn't really love how it like played. And as much as I think the world is a cool idea, it didn't really do it for me either. Because like going to your thing too, like a lot of the characters and the story is like totally forgettable, even though I played that game when it came out 5 years ago. But like, you know, I'm glad that like so many people enjoyed this one, and graphically it looked beautiful. So it's one that I might get around to one day. It's just that like I was never kind of like eventually got around to it during the year. I just never kind of had enough to push me over.
Absolutely fair. All right, then we are at our number ones, and fortunately, the cycle that we've been doing for this already lines up with this, because I know Frank and I are going to have the same number one. So I was going to toss it to Cameron for his number one, much like we did with our film of the year stuff first, anyway. But Cameron, you were already next in line, so tell us about Elden Ring.
Joke's on you now. You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it.
I will throw out here. I didn't have it as an official honorable mention, but I will consider Elden Ring an honorable mention in my list, given the kindness you've been doing carrying me through our Let's Plays so far in our time with the game. It is absolutely the only way I would enjoy this game, even remotely, and even in some of that, we've realized pretty quickly I'm not having fun. Cameron's going to go bring in his beefy leveled up super character so we can get through this and move on to the next thing. So what other aspects of Elden Ring are really doing it for you? Really knocked it out of the park this year, Cam?
I'm going to say Elden Ring has finished the job that Demon's Souls started. Trevor is liking a Souls game. Like we made it, folks. Miyazaki, you might have won Game of the Year. This is your true prize. Yeah, no, Elden Ring is, I've often, like, I have put so much thought into the Soulsborne games, not just in the lore aspect like you'd expect from me, but also in, like, the game design, like, the things that, not necessarily that inspired these games, but the way that I feel about them and how how they speak to me on a level. And I feel the way that they've done that is the Souls games, and this is Demon Souls and the Dark Souls games, specifically, I've been thinking a lot about it over the last few weeks. They do something that they remind me, like, you guys remember or know about the game Quest on like the Atari?
Yeah.
I don't know Quest. I know Adventure on the Atari.
It might be Adventure was what I'm thinking of. It's this classic, like just fantasy adventure game that is super old and ancient, but a lot about that game was found through trial and error. That was a massive part of it. And like, if you hit one wrong thing, you die and you have to start over. There were no, like, this is old ancient stuff. So there's no saves. And
famously the first Easter egg.
First Easter egg is in it. When I think about the Souls games, I think about that game. I feel like that is a spiritual successor in a lot of ways to what that game is trying to do. It is about overcoming great obstacles. And like, there's a lot of like, there are literally thousands upon thousands of hours of people analyzing what makes a Souls game great. This is just kind of like a realization I've had in the last few weeks, is that those games speak to me on that level. Bloodborne speaks to me on a level of, that's kind of like how I also see Castlevania. Like, it's a gothic horror type thing. There's eldritch stuff going on. But the inspiration I feel is that there's something there about like moving through levels of a game and getting through it. I think that's why the Bloodborne PSX like remake that somebody did, where they basically redid the game as a PS1 game.
I believe they're called demakes, where they bring it down graphically.
The way they handled that, and the reason why I think that works perfectly is because I think it does fit perfectly as it is a Castlevania type game, and I think it speaks to the quality of Bloodborne. To Trevor's dismay, I'm very sorry. The trauma is still there, ladies and gentlemen. But the thing about Bloodborne is that, it does kind of capture that Castlevania feel. And not just in the idea of like, oh, it's a platformer, oh, it's an action game, but it's beyond its design aesthetically. Just there's something about the core theme and idea behind it of, you are overcoming these monsters that are so much larger than yourself, and you are dealing with, like at the time with Castlevania, it's Dracula and the occult. In Bloodborne, it's the eldritch abominations that are impacting their world. Elden Ring does that same thing, but what it does it with is like the original Legend of Zelda. You have a vast world, open map that you can move around and go to in all these different orders. There's some areas where the enemies are harder, some where they're easier. And the open world concept, I feel, is a lot less, it is actually truer to the idea of the original Legend of Zelda than Breath of the Wild is, for sure. I think that there is a level of adventure and exploration that the other games, while they might have had like little features or little things, like if you try to hit all these different walls, this will happen. Or, if you notice like which side the chain is on of the chest, that's how you know it's a mimic or not. There are no mimics in this game. There are like the only breakable wall, like the only kind of like invisible wall outside of like very specific areas where there's invisible walls supposed to be. There are no invisible walls. Like, the one that people thought was an invisible wall, they're like, I can't believe I found it after hitting this thing 300 times with my weapon. It finally opened up. And people and the response back to it was, no, that was a bug. We patched it out. It's not happening anymore. The point of it is not to find nooks and crannies to find Easter eggs and enjoy that. It's to find them out in the open world. It's to find, there's a weapon that's a massive Game of Thrones Iron Throne reference. And it's not like hidden or anything. It's right there, obligatory in your face. There's so many things about this game that it pays homage to high fantasy with and mythology. And the way that they tell the story is a lot more direct than in previous games. Trevor commented, because he was watching me do the Radon fight, for people who know. There's the cutscene that happens before it, and Trevor's like, oh, that's far more straightforward than any Souls game's ever done. Yeah. And I didn't have to learn about it from a weapon description. It's so good on so many fundamental levels, whether it's the combat, the exploration, the freedom and of going around, the item differences when it comes to weapons and armor, and just little things that if you know what to look for, if you find them, those same obscure things that you're going to find out from talking to friends on the playground, that that approach that the other games has is still here. But it also is so much more friendly. It has a tutorial area, for God's sakes. Like, it's so much. They've done so much.
I mean, it's still a light tutorial area, and there was like to understand any of the like the stats and stuff, I definitely had to still look at like here's 30 things you should know before jumping into Elden Ring before I played my original Let's Play, let alone like when you joined me and could actually answer the questions like what should I be putting my stats into? I don't know. This is the character I'm doing. Okay, you want to put your stats into this kind of build. All right, we'll go from there. It is very much, again, like I said, I would not nearly put any like the amount of time I've put into this is because you've been there kind of like helping guide me in terms of just like here's where we should go for like the next kind of story beat thing, and here's what makes sense and stuff like that. But then also just like the amount of times we've died even with you there where like you're like, all right, we're gonna do this, we should be fine, and then you immediately die. I'm like, well, we're not making it this run because there's very little chance I'm going to survive this and do it on my own. It is like that's still a thing that's in these games and not my favorite part of these games. But you know, we have had moments like where we get invaded and they do kill you, and then I manage to like eke the win out against the guy and yeah, fuck Weeb Killer. Excuse me. Or
we hate Weeb Killer. All my homies hate Weeb Killer.
Yeah. Or, we have those fun moments where I do at least get the killing blow. Even if you did 90% of the damage on the thing, I run in and stab him with the last, get the last hit on him or something like that. While you've aggroed them, so they're completely, targeting you and attacking you, and I can run in and get the last go.
I no longer take you into fights that I've only beaten like a long time ago. As like a lot of my replaying of it recently has been going through those fights again and like relearning them intimately and not just like recalling memories from like almost a year ago. Because of what we encountered, especially with the Radigan fight, or the Red Wolf of Radigan fight. I'm like, cool. I can't let this happen again because I saw the moment where Trevor was just about to give up, and then he saw that I was with him and he kept going. And I'm like, I got to reward that. I got to be better about this. So I've been doing that. Beefing myself up, not trying to keep myself around your level, but actually beefing myself up, but not to a point where it's like I use my literally like end game leveled up weapon to just like one shot a boss.
I mean, but that's also the thing we found is like when you come into my world, you get nerfed pretty bad. So you got to account for that and compensate for that too. Because otherwise, yeah, we are going to be running around. And you're basically doing it with me as a handicap, which isn't going to help us. But like going through the game with you, we have not reached the breaking point where I'm saying, all right, that's it. We're moving on to a different game. No more Elden Ring Let's Plays. I still have 2 in the can that I'm going to need to basically sit down and edit tomorrow while you're at work for this week. And then we'll, when you get home, maybe we'll sit down and hop into some more. Cause yeah, it's, or, we've had those few times where like, I'm like, all right, I'm going to hop in and I'm just going to grind out some stuff because now that I'm level 42, I can take out this first encampment of the beginning of the game enemies. And, they can still almost kill me, but I've done it. And I pick up a handful of runes and stuff like that. So, baby steps.
I showed you a cheese. You're good. You have to use all your resources for it, but you still get it.
Indeed. I can kill the dragon. Takes every flask I have, but I can kill the dragon.
Progress. It's about progress, crawling towards progress. Other games let you run towards it. Games that claim to be hard let you walk towards it. Souls game, like Miyazaki games, make you crawl for it. Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal on just about every level. I can't give it enough praise. Like putting it over Vampire Survivors and Citizen Sleeper is the highest honor I can possibly give this game. Narratively, I think it's the best that's ever been. I think that gameplay-wise, definitely the best. All the different options, and also, like I told Trevor, it's like this boss is to teach you to run away, that you don't have to encounter a boss and let that gate keep you. It's literally like this boss is too hard, run away, fight other things instead. That's the design important of it. And then Trevor pointed out to me about a game that I've been playing lately, where he goes, "Oh, so the game's trying to make you play a certain way and make you learn lessons?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "But it's not the way you like to play games." I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, sounds like Elden Ring to me." And it's like, motherfucker. God damn it.
Take that, Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah, Hi-Fi Rush. Which I have put more time into. And yeah, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It's winning you over.
It's winning me over. It's
what
already
it
won me
wants
over.
You to do.
It's actually won me over already. I'm actually like I have I have to get things ready for work tomorrow, but so I don't have time to play it tonight, and I'm kind of upset. But,
Yeah. Ha ha ha. Yeah,
Yeah.
we kept you for a 3-hour podcast.
Yep.
Um,
I can't give it enough praise. If we can get Trevor on board, anybody can get on board with this game. Like it gets my absolute seal of approval. I'll say all this also before we start talking about God of War. This is a year of masterpieces in a lot of ways. I think Elden Ring is a masterpiece. I think Horizon's is as close to a masterpiece as you can get for the trouble that I think it has in some of the the drop off points as far as not narration, sorry, as far as the narrative goes. But I think the game we're going to be talking about soon is a masterpiece. But when it comes to this year, it's an absolute last year, it's an absolute stacked year. 2022 was an unexpectedly stacked year for games, unless you believed you had faith that God of War Ragnarok was going to come out, and then you're like, it's definitely going to end in a bang, which it did. So,
Indeed. So segueing into that, because just like in our film episode, Cameron is on the wrong side of history here with his game of the year. So Frank and I both obviously have God of War Ragnarok. I mean, feel free to correct me, Frank.
Nope, that's mine.
Yeah. So Frank, I will let you, because let's also try and be spoiler wary on this one. I mean, I'm happy to put in a spoiler warning if we delve into that, but we haven't done our official spoiler cast. That's a thing we can, maybe circle back around to and do eventually. But yeah, Frank, tell us your why God of War Ragnarok is your game of the year 2022.
Yeah, I mean, man, it's almost easier to go over the reasons like why it should. All right, never mind. I was going to say something there, but
it's easier to go through the reasons why it isn't. Wait, what? Yeah,
exactly. Because I was like, because it's so perfect in so many ways. I think like. I think the story is really good. I think the characters are amazing. It totally just builds off of everything the 2018 God of War did really well anyways, and it just makes a lot of the things better. Like the world and the environments are so unique and different. There's a lot of enemy variety. The combat is like really deep and interesting. And the combat's not always my favorite, but I love the story so much that sometimes I'm like, man, this is getting in my way. I almost just want to just watch all the cutscenes for like an hour or whatever, as I'm trying to line up like a stupid light puzzle where I'm like in an old Tomb Raider. But it like the things like that don't like hold the game back in any serious ways. Like a lot of the things I do have issues with it are just like kind of smaller things that could be fixed in like future games. But it's just such a fun game. It's such a fun experience in the journey to go on, and I love the way it builds off of 2018's God of War, and like that game actually had like consequences, and like that's why a lot of the things in this game are happening, and people have actually like the characters have like grown and changed because of that game and some of like the time in between. And yeah, like I really love like everything about it. And even just like the graphics in it are like incredible. Like there's so many different environments and like really interesting, cool places you go and things you get to see and like big special moments, and like they're so good at putting in these like big spectacle moments, like things that you do where you're just like in crazy fights or like flying around the world or like doing these like big cool adventure moments. And it's hard to say without spoiling some of them, but it's like, it's things like in 2018 God of War is an example, like when you fight a dragon and you're like flying around and doing crazy stuff. It's like they have all these big spectacle moments that still hit, and then even some of the smaller, more intimate moments that also hit really well. And it's definitely, I think, like my favorite game I probably played all year.
Excellent. Before I hop into my thoughts, Cameron, you did have this on your list back at number 4. So do you want to share any of your thoughts on God of War Ragnarok?
Sure. The only reason it's not high, well, there's a lot of reasons it's not higher, but I think the primary reason is what I expected out of God of War is exactly what I got. There were not really a lot of surprises. There's a little bit of things that like I wasn't the biggest fan of, narratively, like narrative wise, as well as like they're not narrative, like it's really
mythology wise.
Yeah, I think that falls into narrative though. Like there's a lot of stuff that I also like. The hangups I have are definitely spoilery, so I won't go too much into those. But I will say that a big thing holding this game not back, but holding it where it is it was a known quantity. When God of War 2018 came out, it was a massive breath of fresh air. It was a completely reinvigorated look at a character with the character's past of Kratos. It's in a great way of an example of how to rehabilitate a poorly communicated character. I think Kratos always had the potential and opportunity to be this kind of a character, but it was just not fully realized by the people who were handling it. Their focus was elsewhere on the aspects of those games. And there is a way that they've handled it. Sony Santa Monica has done such an incredible job with these last two games of really dialing in what is actually great about Kratos as a character, about the relationships that they built in 2018 and executing on those in excellent ways. But I think the biggest thing for me holding it back is it was a known quantity. I knew it was going to be a masterpiece because the first one was. Like, my expectations was masterpiece, and they fulfilled them, and that's phenomenal. But the other games I did not have that level of expectation for, and that's why it was number 4 on my list. But that being said, this game is a masterpiece.
So fun parallel in more ways than one. Would you say God of War Ragnarok is basically your Thor Love and Thunder, where God of War 2018 100%. Was Thor Ragnarok?
100%, it is. I think that God of War 2018 as coming off fresh of what we got and that we've had before, and then walking into that, what we ended up getting was, and it's kind of funny because it's the reverse. Like, by the time God of War 4 is done, or God of War 3, God of War 3 is done. The character's so cartoonish and just absolute, just absolute ridiculous when it comes to its narrative and storytelling with this character. And
it
the way that
beats Zeus to death, and the screen fills with blood.
Yeah,
like literally the entire screen.
Yeah, and you don't stop until you can no longer see anything but blood. Yes, 100%. The edgelord levels were set to max with God of War 3, especially by the end of it.
I don't think it was an original thought that I had, but since I heard it, it is very much always stuck with me that God of War 3 and Batman Arkham Asylum should have switched their endings, because I think that would be a far more interesting story for both beats.
I agree.
Yeah, that's fair. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's actually really good. That's a great point. But yeah, no, when it comes to this one, I just strong, so God of War 2018 has that in its corner. I don't, and it's that same thing with Thor Love and Thunder. I think they successfully on every technical level absolutely nailed that. But the things that I have issues with are the things that are going to be not keeping it where it's at, rather than what I was hoping for was to see progress. It didn't it came out, it performed, it did its job. It's a masterpiece, great. But what new have you given? What new about it? There's a lot of minor things that are great, but it doesn't really serve. There's no big leap taken like we got in 2018 God of War that we get here, and it's not its fault, but I needed more.
Yeah, and I mean, given the 3 games that are above it on your list, you've already kind of espoused why those games gave you something new, whereas God of War Ragnarok was giving you more of an already great thing. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah, and the thing about it, I'll also say is it's not just I'm not somebody who's new is always better, but if this was any other year, this of course would be my number 1. There's a reality where this game came out this year, and it ended up being my game of the year.
So you're really just mad that this ended up screwing over some bet that you thought we had that I couldn't ever find any record of, that God of War Ragnarok wasn't actually going to hit in 2022. Because it did, screw you, God of War Ragnarok, your game number 4 on my list. Got it.
No. Funny as that is, no. But yeah, no, that's funny. It's just I just don't think anything this year stacks up to God of War. So
I mean, we're only a month.
Final
into-
Fantasy. Never mind.
into
Final
this.
Fantasy 16 is coming out this year as well, so we're
Yeah, you
good.
got that.
Never mind. We're fine.
Maybe Rebirth.
And
Final
maybe
Fantasy
Rebirth.
VII
Yeah.
Who knows?
Oh man, that's a hard ask. October, like
We'll see.
yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens there.
This could end up being a banger year at the end. We'll see.
Yeah.
But so far, we don't have Elden Ring coming out in February this year. We don't have there are so many things about this year that that I think God of War probably could have swept it for me, but what it was up against was just, it's too much to ask for God of War to be a masterpiece from its on its fundamental level, then also to do something spectacular and new, to breathe a fresh life into it at the same time. It's probably just too much to ask for in this game.
Sure.
It carries so much.
Again, as I've already pointed out, Cameron is wrong on this one. God of War is my game of the year as well, like Frank's. And I think it is. I think I agree with pretty much everything Frank said. I think it does such an incredible job building on the relationships established in God of War 2018. It is a great sequel in that front of we're not doing The Hangover 2 or something where it's like it's going to be a beat for beat remake of the last thing. It is okay. We ended that last game where we ended it, so we can start this game with characters with Kratos already, spoilers for the first 2 minutes of the game. Kratos is already comfortable putting his hand on Atreus' shoulder and showing pride in him and talking to him in a evolved relationship compared to the first game. His relationship with Mimir is great. His relationship with so many of the other characters is a Kratos we haven't gotten because he has been a Kratos that just kills things. So this is a game where we get to see a Kratos with confidants, with friends even, and we get to see. Because of that, it makes him so much more of a dynamic character and so much more of an interesting character over the course of this game. The relationships that he has that are continued, the new relationships that are introduced in this, all of the new characters, I think are stellar over the course of this game. The way they interact with our known characters, I think, is a lot of fun. And yeah, it's just. So much of this game is about those relationships. The combat is continuing on with the 2018 combat, still great. Leviathan Axe still feels great. We get a new weapon in this that I won't, spoilery. But it, in addition to the Blades of Chaos, feels like a fun new approach to this, and it is also wildly in fitting with Kratos' character and stuff, and works wonderfully. And so from that level, we're running on all cylinders. The 2018, I think one of its not weaknesses, but one of the things that I do think about when I think back on that game is we do get to go into a few of the other realms, but so much of the game takes place in Midgard that is samey. And so the fact that we get to hop into every different realm in this one allows for just so much more of a vibrant design. The fact that we're in super Fimbulwinter in Midgard, but Fimbulwinter doesn't mean the same thing in all these other realms. So we get to go to tropical realms. We get to go to a very a temperate world and stuff like that, while still getting the flames and lava of Muspelheim and stuff like that. But just the world design, I think, is so beautiful and wonderful in this one. And yeah, I played it through a second. I played it through, loved it. I don't think it. I think similar to what you said, Cameron. I don't think it tops 2018 for me, which as I've said and gone on record, topped my long running game of the game of all time of Final Fantasy VI. God of War 18 topped that. But I did do the same thing that I did with God of War 18 of I immediately wanted to go back and do another playthrough, even, getting the platinum in a first run, but still wanting to be I want to play that again. I want to play it now that I know where the story goes. I want to see how moments are set up and introduced and stuff like that. And there's a lot of fun there. The way that the story is told, obviously there are cutscenes and stuff like that. I love that they kept the one-shot mechanic, and I think they did a great job of doing that, especially with the more advanced choices that they tell with their storytelling. The way they can kind of continue that idea throughout this game is a lot of fun. But so much of the story, like, you said earlier, Frank, like sometimes you just want to go and watch the cutscenes. So much of the story is just told in the banter between the characters, not in cutscenes, that I think is so much of a delight. Like some of the side quests where it is like, okay, Mimir's asking us to do this thing, and you get to see how the relationship between Kratos and Mimir has developed in the time between games, and the camaraderie there and the friendship and the brotherhood there is so beautiful. I touched on the Poseidon stuff is like my visual, like Poseidon was my visual moment of the year that I was like, nothing's going to top this. And I will say from like a visual moment, it doesn't top it, but from an emotional moment, the jellyfish stuff that happens in this game visually evokes a lot of the same stuff. And the reason it tops it for me is because we're doing it with characters that we have a relationship with. And the reasons that Kratos gives for wanting to do this are so beautiful. Like, it was bringing tears to my eyes getting to see that. And the way I loved in my second playthrough, I made specific choices to hold off doing certain side quests because you'll get different companions. And so you can do, if you do it the way I did, where I was like, all right, everything's unlocked, I'm going to do everything now, and then I'm going to move on to the next story beat. Keeping some of that held back for when I had other characters with me in a second playthrough was so much more like emotionally charged and satisfying, and also just gives a fun interest and a fun like divergent path of one character is going to react one way because they have a certain relationship with Kratos versus another character reacting another way. I thought was so fun and so interesting, and getting to see those like little differences was a delight. So so much of this game was an easy, like, I loved Forbidden West, but it did all the things I loved in 2018 and continued to build upon them. And so it and introduced Richard Schiff as Odin. So just, you're full on running around with Toby from The West Wing for parts of the game and stuff. And it's like, yep, this is not what I would have thought of with Odin, but I'm here for it, and he's a blast. So much fun, so many great characters. Again, like the old characters, the new characters, the story beats we get. Much like the first game, there's like an end to the game, and then there's like an end to the game. That was really wonderful, and the way certain character arcs kind of wrap up in this one. I'm like, when they announced this was going to be the end of the Norse mythology trilogy, like storyline, because it was very much like I was expecting this game would be about beating Thor, and then a third game would be about beating Odin or something like that. And they made it. They packed all the story I think they needed to pack into this game and made it an interesting and compelling and really fun story. So yeah, shout out to God of War Ragnarok. Any final thoughts on God of War Ragnarok before I relay our top 10 as a site?
Nope, I think you pretty much nailed it. Like, definitely a great game, and I recommend it for pretty much everybody out there, especially if you have a PS5.
Excellent. All right.
I do have one final thought, and that is that you should find our real final thoughts in the spoiler cast that's soon to come.
Indeed, we'll eventually do that. I reached out at one point to our friend of the show, Brandon Gann, to bring him in for that. I'm sure he will have a lot of wonderful thoughts on it as well. And so hopefully we can still make that work. So stay tuned for that. Maybe next week. We'll see. Who knows? So interesting thing that I want to highlight first and foremost before we get into the top 10. Across the three of our lists, we hit 25 different games, which again just speaks to how, and that is just the top 10s, not counting honorable mentions and stuff like that. If I count honorable mentions, I think we mentioned probably, let's see, like 35 games. So yes, across just our scored games, 25 different games. So there was so little crossover among the three of us this year. And as always, because of just, how the counts work out, we have a lot of ties. So I will say this. If I want to keep it to a top 10, we don't have a number 10. We have a tied for number 9. So do you guys want to know the 3 games that tied for number 11 as well?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. So a 3-way tie for number 11. We have Cult of the Lamb, Stray, and Neon White, all with 6 points. Unsurprisingly, as they were pretty much all on an individual list. Our tie for number 9 was Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga and The Quarry. So my game and Frank's game there. Our sole number 8 game of the year is Sifu. Our tie for number 6 is Citizen Sleeper and Road 96. Our 3-way tie for number 3, I will give a slight edge to 2 of these games. Elden Ring comes in here with 10 points, obviously from Cameron there as his number 1. And then Tunic and Vampire Survivor are in there also with 10 points, but they are slightly above because they were on 2 people's lists. Our number 2 game of the year, Horizon Forbidden West, with 14 points. And unsurprisingly, and continuing our trend of the only game that everybody on the panel played, with all 3 of us loving God of War Ragnarok, it is unsurprisingly our game of the year here in 2022, with a total of 27 points. So shout out to a great year of games and a very, again, eclectic and diverse year of games that can speak to 3 very different tastes and interests. Here again with like when I tallied it up, I was like 25 different games. So there's only like 5 games that like more than one of us included on our list. Is some wild, funny stuff. So that's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining me for yet another epic chatting about our favorite games here in 2022. Let us go around our metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a tremendous shout out to That T Plus show. We've had some really good episodes lately. Coincidentally, I've been on most of them. What up?
Helps now that we live together.
Yeah, it
and
certainly
I can
helps.
just be like, hey, Cam, you want to watch a thing real quick? And we can talk about it?
Yep, it certainly helps. It's always a great time. This most recent episode is actually when I'm not on, but it is covering something that I found to be very fun, which is the Zootopia Plus stuff. As I've noted before, I'm a big fan of these shorts that are on Disney Plus. So go check out that episode where Trevor and Logan go in depth about those episodes or those shorts. And yeah, go check that out.
Cool. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to our Let's Plays going up over on youtube.com/thatnerdy site. Like we talked about earlier, you guys are doing some Elden Ring fun right now, and then eventually you may go back to Skyrim. But, besides that, there's all kinds of other cool, fun Let's Plays going up all the time. So definitely shout out to those.
Indeed. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I will also echo the shout outs there of the Let's Plays. Yeah, we're 4 episodes. Well, if you count my like pilot episode where it was just me playing my first, hour or so of Elden Ring, we are 5 episodes into Cameron helping me through Elden Ring. Again, we have 2 more already in the can. One of them is going to be a crazy edit because we recorded it over like 2 nights and trying a whole bunch of stuff. And we were basically like, all right, we're going to cut this part out. And, we did a whole bunch of stuff that will be off camera kind of thing. But yeah, that's still going strong. Yeah, currently my Skyrim series ended at episode 36 after beating the main campaign and the like Civil War quest line. But I do still have like the Dark Brotherhood stuff I could go back to, or all the DLC that I don't think I ever went back to or played in my original stuff. So that would also be all new to me if I end up doing that. So if I ever need, because it is a light year for a little while here, it's certainly nice to have those that we can fall back on. But then, yeah, also once we get our situation settled here, living wise, we can start kind of exploring a setup so Cam and I can start doing some co-op stuff. We had like GoldenEye coming to Switch and Xbox this week. I was like, oh, it would have been fun to have like just a split screen, slaps only something in GoldenEye or something.
I don't know about that, Trevor. I've seen some of the gameplay from that game, and it's like that game did not hold up.
Oh yeah, no, I hopped into it a little bit the other night, and it's fine. And they actually did make some like control adjustments to make it smoother and better.
Do I still have to hold the shoulder button to aim?
Yes, but I mean, you would have to do that. Well, I mean, like you can if you want to like do pinpoint targeting, yes.
Oh, okay.
But if you like just kind of point your stuff, you'll do a pretty good job of hitting stuff. But yeah, I mean, in the same like in the same way you have to like aim down sights in any other game. Yes, you have to hold a button to do that. So anyway, you follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest, including what we will eventually have as some write-ups of our various lists. I was going back and reworking on some of those today, so we'll have those trickle out here in the weeks to come. But this is probably the last of our of the year content, at least podcast wise. We did our kind of favorite movies a couple weeks ago. We did our favorite like various miscellaneous other things Cameron and I sat down and talked about last week, and now our game of the year. Thank you. As always, if you like what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. As always, thank you for listening. Stay nerdy and be good to each other.